Good evening, everyone. The City Council is returning from closed session soon, so if you want to speak on any items on the agenda or not on the agenda, please make sure to fill out a speaker slip. They're over here next to the door, pens are on the lowest rack. And if you're online, please make sure you raise your hand for public communication for items not on the agenda. So we do need to receive those by 7:15. Thank you.
ready to go? Council, you ready?
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry, one more agenda.
10 seconds.
Sorry. Yeah. Anybody else need an agenda?
Welcome to the October 22nd, 2024 Millbrae City Council meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7:05 p.m. City Clerk, would you please do a roll call?
Councilmember Nguyen.
Here.
Councilmember Riley. Councilmember Snyder.
Present.
Vice Mayor Pappen. Here. Mayor Fung.
Here.
All members of the City Council are present.
Thank you so much. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance if you are able. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. And we'll get started today with the ceremonial presentation. The first one is proclaiming the month of November as Native American Heritage Month. And today we're joined with virtually the Association of Romatash Ohlone, Cultural Director Greg Castro. Councilwoman Ann Schneider.
Welcome, Mr. Castro. We met up at the Exploratorium on the sea level rise event. Welcome. Okay, whereas the rich culture, traditions, and histories of Native Americans have significantly shaped the heritage of the United States, enriching our nation's history, arts, and communities. And whereas on August 3rd, 1990, President George H.W. Bush declared the month of November as National American Indian Heritage Month, thereafter commonly referred to as Native American Heritage Month. And whereas Native American Heritage Month is celebrated each year in November to commemorate the history and culture of America's indigenous peoples. And whereas in Millbrae, we recall and recognize the original Native American habitats of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. And whereas the Ohlones, or people of the West, were distinguished by peaceful pursuits, especially in agriculture, and held a profound reverence for the earth, believing it was theirs for living and not for the taking. And whereas today, the Ohlones are people who live as a contemporary American, but because of the tenacity, generosity, and foresight of their elders and the interest of the young, the wisdom and culture of generations of Ohlone people have continued to the present, as it will into the future. And whereas the City of Millbrae recognizes and honors the history and contributions of the indigenous people who originally lived in this area, and whereas the City of Millbrae acknowledges and supports a continued strong relationship with the Ramaytush Ohlone and all indigenous people for prosperity, health, and the highest of welfare. We, therefore, we, the members of Millbrae City Council, do hereby proclaim November 2024 as Native American Heritage Month.
And we have joining us virtually, Director Greg Castro. Would you like to say a few words for us?
Well, hi, it's Monica, and thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. My name is Greg Castro, Totralslin, Rumson, Ramaytush Ohlone, 3 lineages of Central California indigenous people who have been here in this area for thousands and thousands of years, and I'm currently the culture director for the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone. And we're continuing our work as given to us by our ancestors to take care of the land and take care of all the living things on it. And we very much appreciate this honor and this acknowledgement of the contributions of Native people to the city of Millbrae and to the landscape all around the San Francisco Peninsula. And it's work that we're still continuing and hope to continue to join with Millbrae and other agencies and organizations to continue that work. Very much appreciate your acknowledging Native American Heritage Month.
Thank you so much, Director Castro, and it's good to have you today.
Thank you.
Come back and see us anytime.
Thank you.
Yep. So next up, we have Proclamation proclaiming November 11, 2024 as Veterans Days, and we're thankful to have our CEO, one vet, one voice. Welcome back to Millbrae, Courtney Ellington, and then Vice Mayor Pappen. Would you like to get started?
Thank you. We'll get there 1 second. The City of Millbrae, California Proclamation. Whereas throughout our nation's history, brave men and women have selflessly answered the call to serve in the United States Armed Forces, defending our country and preserving our freedoms. And whereas Veterans Day is dedicated to honoring the courage, dedication, and sacrifice of all who have served in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and Space Force in times of peace and war across generations. And whereas the valor, patriotism, and commitment of our veterans have been essential in shaping our nation's security and ensuring the preservation of our democracy and way of life. And it is fitting to acknowledge the extraordinary contributions, the service of these heroes who have given so much to protect and uphold the ideals upon which our nation was founded. And whereas November 11th marks the anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I, and this day has since been recognized as a time to honor all American veterans, both past and present, for their unwavering dedication and duty. And whereas on this Veterans Day, we express our deepest gratitude to all veterans and their families for their enduring sacrifice, resilience, and commitment to the principles of liberty and justice for all. And whereas their abiding patriotism, enduring devotion to the ideals on which the United States is founded can never fail to inspire us. Now, therefore, we, the members of the Millbrae City Council, do hereby proclaim November 11th, 2024 as Veterans Day. Nice to see you again.
Thank you, Courtney. Would you like to have a few words for us?
Yes, on the behalf of One Vet, One Voice team, I would like to, first of all, give a warm thank you and show my gratitude for you all giving me the opportunity to stand here today to represent the brave men and women who have served our country. We sincerely appreciate the City of Millbrae for recognizing the sacrifices that veterans have made for the freedom we enjoy today. Your acknowledgement means a great deal to us and to the entire veteran community. It reinforced the bond we share with our city and highlights the importance of honoring those who have dedicated their lives to service. Thank you once again for your recognition and support for our veterans, and together we can continue to honor our veterans and uplift our community, forging a brighter future for us all. Thank you.
Thank you. So good to see you here, Courtney.
Good to see you.
Wait a minute.
Please join us at the podium for a photo.
And can we invite any veterans in the audience to please join us as well? Please. Come on up.
And Councilwoman Schneider have a few words for us?
Just for the record, I do collect First Nation art. And sadly, 3 days ago, one of the last remaining Navajo code talkers who were instrumental in World War II passed away. Oh, my program just left. So I wanted to close in honor of him tonight, 107 years old, and I just had it up, and I'll get it.
Okay. Okay, next, we're joining up with the recognition of the high school counselor leaders of the Millbrae Youth Parliamentary Program, and we proudly present this commendation to 4 individuals tonight. And we're so glad to have Serene Chang with us today, Elizabeth Boer, Jaime Lazaro, and also Elizabeth Chan for your work and outstanding dedication to empowering the young individuals with the knowledge and skill needed to become informed and engaging citizens. And through your leadership, guidance, and commitment to civic education, you've inspired the next generation to better understand the principles of democracy, the working of governments, and the importance of active participation in public service. We commend your dedication to building strong, informed, and capable leaders for tomorrow. And all of you, I'm so glad to know that, this is not a spectator sport. This is definitely participatory, and we're thankful that our youth leaders are capable of doing just that, and the understanding of that. It just makes me very, very proud. So if you have a few words for us, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much to the Millbrae City Council for your comments and lending us this amazing chamber room that allowed us to hold this program for the 2nd year. We'd like to give a special thank you to City Manager Tom Williams, Councilmember Schneider, and City Clerk Tran, as well as the Millbrae City Council for helping us organize this youth program for the 2nd year. It was very successful. We had around 20 participants, and we had a really long wait list of around, I think, 30 students. So we were definitely in very top demand, and the Millbrae residents loved it. I remember in the beginning of the program, we surveyed the participants and we asked them how much you knew about the government, and would you vote when you turn 18, or would you pre-register to vote when you're 16? The majority of them didn't raise their hands, but at the end of the program, all of them raised their hands, and we were, as the members of our program, we were really happy.
I believe the week of June 3rd, in which we introduced 20 youth into city council chambers and taught them the inner workings of government and how to project themselves and speak as the leaders of the future, was able to have a huge impact on the city of Millbrae and our future as well. And so we are advancing our mission to spread civics education to the youth of all San Mateo County and the Bay Area.
All right, thank you so much. Would you please join us? All right. So next up, we have the San Mateo Local Agency Formation Commission, our LAFCo representatives, executive officer, giving us a municipal service review presentation. Executive Officer Rob Bartoli.
Good evening, Mayor Fung, City Council members, and City staff. My name is Rob Bartoli. I'm the Executive Officer of the San Mateo Local Agency Formation Commission, and thank you for having me tonight. And I am here tonight to present on a municipal service review that LAFCo has conducted for the city of Millbrae. So next slide. Briefly before discussing the report itself, I just want to give a little background on what LAFCo is. So LAFCo is the Local Agency Formation Commission, as normally known as LAFCo. It's a public agency that's established for each county by the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act, which is a state law. And its primary purpose is the regulation of boundaries of cities and special districts. LAFCo adopts something called spheres of influence, is planned for the boundaries of those cities and special districts. So San Mateo LAFCo has a purview over the boundaries of the 20 cities and 55 special districts within the county. We also prepare municipal service reviews, which we'll talk about briefly tonight, looking in the context of state law and state policies that promote logical boundaries, efficient delivery of services, and the elimination of overlapping service deliveries. LAFCo also reviews and processes applications for boundaries and governance changes. Those include annexations to cities, and LAFCos are independent from local, county, and state governments. And the LAFCo Commission itself is comprised of 2 county supervisors, 2 city council members, 2 special district members, a member of the public, and then alternates for each. And Councilmember Snyder is a alternate for San Mateo LAFCO, and for the city member. On the next slide, we'll talk briefly about what a municipal service review is, and that's the report that I'm here to present on tonight. So municipal service reviews, or MSRs, are state-mandated studies conducted by LAFCO, and they analyze governance structures, the fiscal health of agencies, and the efficiencies of services that are provided by those agencies. And there are several determinations and recommendations that are in an MSR. Similar to a grand jury report, though, those recommendations are non-binding, but the commission or another entity could later take action to initiate certain changes based on those recommendations. And an MSR is a prerequisite to a sphere of influence. On the next slide, we'll talk about what a sphere of influence actually is. So that's a plan for the probable physical boundaries of a service area of a local agency. So that could be inclusive of for a city or a district. It can include unincorporated territory or can include territory within a city. A municipal service review informs what that probable plan is and what that sphere of influence should be. And that's determined by LAFCO. The factors that need to be considered for a sphere of influence include land use of that area in the sphere, as well as the need and the capacity of public services by that agency to provide services into that area. So the 3 types: there's an expanded, which means there's area within the sphere of influence. There's coterminous, meaning the boundary of the jurisdiction is also coterminous with the sphere of influence, meaning there's no change. And there's dissolution or zero, which is applicable only really to special districts. On the next slide, the city of Millbrae, I'll briefly touch on its history with LAFCO. Incorporated in 1948. The sphere of influence currently for Millbrae and has as such since the 1960s, includes a small portion of unincorporated San Francisco Airport lands territory, is what we'll refer to them to, which is to the northeast of the city boundary and west of Highway 101, so it's an undeveloped parcel. And also since 1979, the sphere of influence for the city has included a recommendation to detach Cappuccino High School from the city of San Bruno and annex that parcel to the city of Millbrae. It's highly irregular in their boundaries, and the high school already receives services from the city of Millbrae. The city provides water, wastewater, storm drain, park recreation functions, and local land use, and the city contracts for police, fire, and library services. On the next slide, there's a map of that sphere of influence. And from LAFCO, in the orange, brown, the darker color, that is the existing city boundaries of Millbrae. The yellowish color is that airport lands, again, west of Highway 101, that's undeveloped currently. And then there is Cappuccino High School, which is, again, almost entirely surrounded by the city of Millbrae. It loses perspective on here because of the scale, but there's a small corridor that attaches to the city of San Bruno, just to the north of Cappuccino High School. On the next slide, this real brief highlights of kind of the report that we've discussed and as we're talking about tonight. Some issues that we would just like to note from that report is, the city's enterprise funds for water, sewer, and stormwater drains are proposing to use fund balance in 24-25 in review of those proposed capital improvement projects and the remaining revenue and fund balance for these 3 enterprise funds. It's unclear from LAFCO, at least looking at the available public documents, if there's sufficient revenue to undertake the proposed infrastructure projects that are in the capital improvement program for the city. Also, the city, per its last update, has continued to implement a number of cost-saving measures, including hiring freezes at the time, reducing spending on upgrades or deferred maintenance for city facilities, and having general fund subsidies for capital improvement projects, particularly those, and freezing those unless they're mandated necessarily and achievable by the city. Very briefly, I just want to touch on some of the determinations on the next slide. About growth in population. Currently, the city of Millbrae, as of 2020, is home to approximately 20,000 people, and there's housing stock of about 8,000. But in the city's housing element, there's a population proposed increase of housing stock by 22% over the next 8 years. In several cities that we've studied as part of our work plan the last couple of years for municipal service reviews, we have looked at the city's urban water management plan, which forecasts demand in 20 to 2045 A lot of cities have adopted their urban water management plan around 2020, and then they have later adopted housing elements, which lots of times have had increased growth from when that urban water management plan was adopted. So one of the recommendations from LAFCo is to encourage the city to update its urban water management plan to align with any projected development that's in that newly adopted housing element from the city. We do have a statement about disadvantaged unincorporated communities, and there's a specific definition for what that is in state law. That's not applicable to the city of Millbrae in the sense that the only unincorporated area within its sphere of influence that could potentially be annexed to the city in the future is currently undeveloped and has no population there. On the next slide, LAFCO is not aware of any deficiencies regarding capacities for services. The city has had a robust planning document in its housing element, and it's, when their projects are up for review, there's sufficient environmental impacts reviews that are done to understand what those impacts of those public facilities determinations would be. And again, there's limited area for development within the unincorporated area of San Mateo County that's adjacent to the city of Millbrae. We do encourage, though, the city to look at potential revenue increases for or creation of dedicated revenue for stormwater projects. One thing in looking at city budgets is that the stormwater projects are largely funded by transfers out of the general fund. There's not sufficient revenue for those projects to be accomplished by fees or just stormwater. And LAFCo also encourages the city to continue to work with Central County Fire, the city of Burlingame, and the town of Hillsborough regarding a recent community risk assessment standards that was done by Central County Fire, the JPA. The city has received services from fire because as part of that, the recommendations looked at some of the services that came from the city of Millbrae. It noticed that in Station 37, which is in the city of Millbrae, has historically incurred some of the most service demand within the service area for Central County Fire. And there's also several recommendations and noted observations regarding the city of Millbrae, including the lack of representation from the city on the JPA board for Central County Fire. On the next slide, talking about financial ability, LAFCo staff has not identified any issues with the city budget practice. As mentioned earlier, regarding the sewer water and stormwater funds are currently using fund balance to pay for capital projects. For storm drain, the majority of those revenues are transfers from the general fund because there's not sufficient revenue in that fund to pay for capital projects. And again, the general fund itself has been able to cover budgeted expenditures over the last years, and the city has projected that it will be able to do so in future years. We do have several recommendations, though, on the next slide regarding financial ability. And again, this LAFCo encourages the city to look at potential revenue for stormwater projects. This is, again, a issue that that LAFCO has seen with a number of other cities where revenue is sufficient for water and sewer in most cases, but a number of cities have had struggles with stormwater and being able to fund those improvements. The city also encourages, LAFCo also encourages the city to develop projections for the sewer, water, and storm drain enterprise funds to provide a complete assessment of these funds, particularly about how funds will be used in the future for capital improvement projects. Looking at this publicly available documents, as noted in recommendation number 3, there is not a breakout of capital improvement projects and operational costs. So if you look at just the funds for sewer, water, and stormwater in public available documents, whether that be the budget or in audits, it's just one line item that's rolled up for all those expenditures. So it's challenging to see whether or not for future years, those are capital projects that are using fund balance or those are operation and maintenance costs and ongoing. That might be a recommendation for both transparency and for the sake of ease and a better understanding for the public about what those costs would be for those particular areas. On the next slide, shared services, the city of Millbrae partners with several agencies. And again, we encourage the city to continue to work with Central County Fire and explore some of the recommendations and understanding whether or not the city has made an attempt with Central County Fire to join that JPA. And for accountability, structure, and efficiencies, the city of Millbrae ensures that public meetings are accessible and well publicized, and LAFCo is not aware of any failures to comply with disclosure laws or the Brown Act. On the next slide, on other determinations, The city, one of the other areas that we look at is hazard mitigation and water. And the city of Millbrae is engaged in activities to address hazard mitigation, wildfire prevention in a number of ways, and sea level rise. And that's partnering with either One Shoreline or being a participant in the local hazard mitigation plan for the county. On the next slide, I'd also like to note that similar to MSRs that we conduct for all other agencies within the county, the primary source of LAFCo documents, information that comes from the LAFCo documents is from information collected by by LAFCo staff from the agency and adopted plans and documents for the city. And as per practice, LAFCo submitted a request for data to the city for a report, and LAFCO staff is currently working with the city on this data request and will incorporate any information the city does provide us in our final version of the report. So any comments from city, the public, or other agencies will be addressed in the final MSR. The draft of the MSR is on the LAFCO website. On the previous slide, there's the LAFCO website link, which can be found there. The final municipal service review is scheduled for a November 20th hearing before the LAFCO Commission. That meeting is at 2:30. It'll be on person and available on Zoom, and that information can be found on the LAFCO website if anyone would like to participate. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or receive any comments.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bartoli. Any questions or comment from this council? Vice Mayor Pappen?
Yeah, to our staff, or actually the subcommittee, whoever deals with Central Fire, it's really, I'm not sure why they didn't include us to begin with in the report you're talking about here. I mean, that would be more directed towards Central Fire. It seems like it would have been more efficient, since we do contract with them, that we would have been included in that report. And we probably should send them a letter. They're going to pursue reports like this because they know it's going to impact us anyway. That should be part of their processing, that Millbrae is included, or they reach out to the city so that we're not backtracking here to try to be a part of that. And I know that's not you, but to our city, they should be including us in that process.
You mean in terms of the districting?
So you went back and had a recommendation that we should continue working with Central Fire. It's a few slides back, I think. I think another one. Yeah, maybe is this the one? No, even further, I think.
The one before that one, or two
Yeah.
before it. That one.
Here, yeah. LAFCo encourages the city to continue to work with Central Fire regarding the implementation of recommendations from the community risk assessment standards. So again, I think we should be writing off a letter to them that we should have been a part of this to begin with, instead of your encouraging us. So again, I don't know who's on the subcommittee, but our staff should clearly.
Well, Mayor, so point of clarity, I mean, we do work with them. So I think this is just continuing to work with them. There's several plans, works in progress, one of those being their strategic plan that we partnered with. I think the mayor was surveyed, I was surveyed, met with a consultant. So it's evolving, and we will absolutely continue to work with CCFD.
Yeah, it sounds like CCSD completed theirs. So it would have been nice to be a part of the ongoing process, and that.
The report I'm referring to, because we also recently did an MSR for both the town of Hillsborough and the city of Burlingame. So the Central County Fire conducted that report, I think, in 2023. So there were comments from the city of Millbrae. I don't know the full extent who made those comments, but that was one of some of the recommendations that come out of that report. We encourage the city to continue to work with CCFD on that discussion.
So I think I can perhaps chime in a little bit. CCFD did recently completed the interview process for their strategic plan, and I was part of that interview process. And I was pretty clear to them that, in order for, CCFD and City Millbrae to continue to be successful in providing the services that our city needs, we need to be a part of the discussions in all the things that happens around CCFD, including the governance. So this is already a topic that they're aware of, that we're interested in, so that, as obviously here we're discussing the creation of a dedicated revenue source and some of the other things that has to do with the discussion at the board level in terms of policy decisions and recommendations. Those are the type of things that I think Millbrae need to be at the table for. And I've been pretty clear on that with them, and it's part of their strategic plan development. Councilwoman Schneider?
Okay. I was on the fire subcommittee up until the last year or two, and we have multiple times tried to work with CCFD. I would suggest for the new city council that they consider that in the goal setting.
Yeah.
That might be one way to move it up higher. I have a set of other questions. As I said, I'm a novice still on LAFCo. I think I've been on for about a year and a half, but I do read the other city plans. And in Millbrae, when the city manager and I talked about sphere of influence, we have a number of public agencies that own major portions of us. The downside is, as a public agency, they pay no property tax. They do pay fire assessment. So when we're talking about Cappuccino, and for everybody here, since I'm an old timer, the county gave the land in Millbrae, which was unincorporated Millbrae at the time, to San Bruno so they would have a high school. The first graduating class was the class of 1950. I know that because I was the 25th graduating class in 75. So the question comes, Cappuccino is completely surrounded by Millbrae. We cover their utilities, but I do not believe they pay fire assessment to us. And then there's a little bit of that area that has shared fire service with San Bruno. It's kind of weird how you hear about it over the times. But I'm wondering if the little strip that's owned by SFO, that again, if there's a fire out there, it's us coming to that. Is it to our advantage to annex both Cappuccino and the SFO territories, in which case they would at least have to pay special assessments? Is that correct?
So I'd have to know more about how the special assessment works and whether that's applicable in the public agencies. So I don't know, I can't really respond to that specific question. Yeah.
So based on just who pays fire assessment, the one thing that we can have public agencies pay, it might be to our advantage to annex Cappuccino and the SFPUC land. The other reason I bring that up, I also serve on City County Association of Governments Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Sorry, folks, BPAC. And so we read all the grants and we score all the grants. And San Bruno had a grant that they received. I'm happy for them, but it included making changes on our streets at Cappuccino. And when I pushed back, I said, well, that's not San Bruno. They're like, oh, well, we're working with them. And when I come back and check with staff, they said, no, nobody talked to us. So I think that there are some reasons that we should look at Cappuccino that can clarify how we design safer streets around a very busy high school on that. So that's my recommendation. And again, especially if it can mean that we can get some revenue streams for that. The problem I have with the disadvantaged communities is the way Millbrae is structured and the way the census tracts are structured. It buries people who have needs within higher income communities. So if you look at Lomita Park and the families that send kids to Lomita Park, they are the same socioeconomics as San Bruno. But because that's a little chunk of Millbrae that got carved out to create our very formation, we've never been able to help those disadvantaged communities. So I think that that is something that LAFCo needs to look at, and they need to break it down into units smaller than a census tract. I think the data really gets buried in a census tract. So that's my encouragement to LAFCo in the future. The third thing, I'm a novice at doing public records acts. I did a public record act of the county assessor to find out who were the property owners that pay no property tax. What I got back was a spreadsheet by parcel number by acreage, which would mean I would have to go back and check each parcel number and find out the owner. I think it would be very helpful if LAFCo for every city knew how much square miles or acreage out of a city pays no taxes in terms of their overall financial well-being. It is my belief that that's one of the reasons why Millbrae is one of the lowest funded cities, because so much of our land is under public agency ownership and pay no taxes. San Bruno has the National Cemetery, a huge swath of their town, and they're also very low. If you look at their per capita general fund ratio, also very low. So I think LAFCo could do a better job by doing some of that homework for the small cities that simply don't have the manpower to do that. And I would love to see that data when I come off council. Maybe I'll have the free time to go back and measure every parcel tax and build out the spreadsheet that I was sent. But really, cities shouldn't have to do that. We should be getting it from the assessor's office. We already talked about, you made a mention that Millbrae is the growing percentage of CCFD calls. I would push back on that from my time on there. When you look at the campuses that Burlingame is building and the cost of new equipment, it is very tall structures. So if you look at the new Meta campus, at its height, that triggers the need for different trucks and things like that. So I'm just pushing back a little bit on where the reason why the costs are going up on CCFD. And then the last thing, and I've talked to the city manager as I'm still wrapping my head around the concept of sphere of influence. We are uniquely impacted by entities that are so much bigger and more powerful than us. So SFO goes and does its sea level rise project. They want to do their work to protect them from sea level rise, but that will trap all of the water from storms into Millbrae. Caltran and the Managed Lane Project did the same thing. When they did the Managed Lane Project and basically rebuilt 101, the only advantage we got was rubberized asphalt, which will absorb some of the sound. But all of the water that lands on the freeway is draining into Millbrae. And my guess is all of that water landing on 101 is draining into the west side of cities. Make all that stormwater work onto the cities, not onto the entity that controls that property. And I think that that's another fault within LAFCo. Does that make sense to you? I'm not trying to push back on LAFCo, but I'm just trying to be reasonable. One Managed Lane should have come to Millbrae and said, wow, we're doing this big redesign. Where is that stormwater going to go? Instead of flooding into the very canal that causes us to flood because SFO controls that canal and for 20 years didn't clean it out. So the sphere of influence is not just what we have, but what they have over us. And I think that might be true for every city in the county. It is especially true for Millbrae and San Bruno. So those are my comments on pushing back on this. The other thing that I would add, I grew up at the top of Helen Drive. So to me, Harry Tracy Water Treatment Plant is Millbrae. I've now since toured that plant, and their main entranceway is actually through San Bruno. That was eye-opening to me because all the trucks would drive past my house to get up there. So I think that that is another area that Millbrae should consider annexing, is the Harry Tracy Treatment Plant owned by SFPUC, and therefore they pay us the fire assessment because if they catch on fire, it's our fire department on that. So that's just my take on the report. It is still fun learning new and how all of this works. But for all of us cities that don't have the big corporations and don't have car dealerships and Costco's, it is very hard to get your budget to come through. And I think there needs to be recognition countywide on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other council members? Thank you, Mr. Bertoli. Oh, 1 second. Councilmember Nguyen.
So kind of new to this, but I just had some quick questions about your slides. One was, after looking, just you mentioning the stormwater infrastructure, do we have any methods or a way of evaluating the conditions of the stormwater drains?
I probably would direct that question to your city staff.
Yeah, Councilmember, we do, and Sam Batista, our Director of Engineering and Public Works, could answer questions, but also in forthcoming budget preparations for our capital improvement program, all of that will be explained, and the council will be briefed on that, on our condition. I think the important thing that was recognized by this report is that the funding and the revenue source, which is a very small, I think it's $200,000 a year in total revenue in a small little assessment for the city, is not sufficient to maintain specifically our storm drain system. So we need to look at other revenue. Our water enterprise, sewer enterprise are healthy. Our storm drain, as a lot of cities, as was mentioned, need some attention. So, but we'll get into that during.
So stormwater issues for funding is not unique to the city of Millbrae. We've seen that in a number of other cities.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Bertoli.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. All right, we got next up, it's the agenda overview and staff briefing. City Manager Tom Williams, would you please provide us with a city manager update and also get a report out on October 22nd, 2024 closed session, please?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you. Good evening to you, members of the City Council, members of the public. Tom Williams, City Manager. There is no reportable action this evening in closed session. I would like to thank Rob for the great work that he's done and the collaboration. So as he leaves, thank you for the work. Also in that, we're coming into the fall, our spring season, our summer season. We have a lot of festivals and a lot of events. And so I just want to take the opportunity to thank our public works staff, obviously overseen by Sam Batista, Craig Sintis, Joe Mendoza, Chris Falzone, their entire crew that's out very early in the morning, late at night, putting up the stage, cleaning up the streets, the sidewalks, steam cleaning the sidewalks for events. So we all know that we are a city of festivals and continue to grow and enjoy that. And I just want to recognize our public works staff for the great work over this last season, spring and summer season for that. So my hat's off to the great work and collaboration they always do. So speaking of that, we do have some continuation of events. We have our Halloween Candy Wrapper Art Contest. This is open to submissions through November 15th. So all Millbrae students are invited to create art pieces with leftover candy wrappers and other recycled materials for a chance to win a prize. So submissions will be judged by each grade level, elementary, middle school, and high school, by theme, originality, and effort. There will be one winner per grade, elementary, middle, high school, and they'll be chosen and given a grand prize of $50 gift cards and acknowledgement at the November 26th City Council meeting. Also, Sunday, October 27th is the annual Rotary Kids Carnival at Rotary Park. This starts at 11 a.m. And kids 10 and under are invited to come and play games. There's a very famous clown, been on TV, Bostwick the Clown, that all the kids love and enjoy. Participate in a Halloween costume contest. And it's a great event for kids throughout the community to come and enjoy over at Rotary Park, which if you don't know where that is, it's just on the south side of Millbrae Avenue on Ashton at the Spur Trail. Also, Tuesday, November 5th is our Senior Stories. Senior Stories every first Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. They're held at the Millbrae Recreation Senior Lounge. Coffee, pastries, and storytelling as members of the community share their life stories. They're invited by the seniors to come in and provide their life stories. As I mentioned, they asked me to do it, but after about 2 minutes, they didn't really care about my life story. They cared about the potholes and everything that's happening in the city. So, but it's a great group. I encourage anybody to also contact them. A whole lot of fun.
That you showed up, so.
Saturday, November 9th. This is another great program by our Environmental Programs Division. This is Gray Water Laundry to Landscape Workshop. And so Environmental Programs will host the Gray Water Laundry to Landscape Workshop. This will be held at the Millbrae Recreation Center, November 9th, which is Saturday at 11 a.m. Participants will explore how to reuse residential gray water, best gardening-friendly soaps and detergents to use, and master the art of building their own laundry to landscape gray water system. So again, I think this is a great opportunity and a great class. 11 a.m., November 9th at the Recreation Center. Also, Courtney Ellington left. She's with One Vet, One Voice over the past several years. She's been a great partner with the city for November 11th Veterans Day flag raising. This year it will be at 9 a.m. It's a recognition, Veterans Day salute, flag raising, again on Veterans Day, which is Monday, November 11th, 9 a.m. They're changing it up with the committee and some of the veterans here in the community. It's going to be at 500 Broadway, which is the plaza where Leonardo's Delicatessen is, and where Bank of the Orient will be moving their corporate headquarters.
That's right.
And so in the plaza area, that's located at the northeast corner of Taylor and Broadway. And so it's a great recognition of our veterans, a lot of great speeches and things like that of our local veterans. So there'll be pastries, coffee, so please, it's a wonderful event. And then lastly, November 12th is the annual or the monthly senior luncheon. Starts at 11:30 a.m. at the Recreation Center. Reservations are required. It's just becoming extremely popular. You can look on our website in our Recreation Department to reserve a spot. Lunch costs $5. but it's also free to all of those that have a birthday that month. So anybody that has a birthday for the month of November can come November 12th, celebrate the birthday and enjoy a senior lunch at the Rec Center, 11:30. So, Mr. Mayor, Council, that is a brief update on what's happening in the city of Millbrae.
Thank you so much, City Manager. Councilwoman Schneider, you have something?
I see our recreation director, and sadly, she has told me that my candy wrapper to chain, I'm too old. But here is my submittal. I didn't know if you wanted it up on the desk at the Recreation Department so people can get an idea. But this is my dad loved Hershey's chocolate. You can turn them into this. I actually made gum wrappers when I was in high school. I had 3 football-length gum wrappers. Shows you what a terrible gum chewer I was. But for the kids out there, this is one idea of candy wrappers to something. Hannah, I brought this for you. I do want it back, but because it's my dad. But, you know, there you go. I'm looking forward to seeing all of the candy wrappers to art.
That's a beautiful candy wrapper. All right.
It's a lot of calories.
Okay. I think we've gotten a lot healthier since. Okay, so the approval minute, number 3 item, and it's a special and continued meeting minutes of August 6, 2024. Does any?
Happen
someone have
move
any-
approval?
Okay, we have a motion to approve from Vice Mayor Pappen.
Approve. Second.
All right, we got a second from Councilmember Bob Nguyen. Any further comment, questions? Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Nguyen,
Here.
Councilmember Riley,
Aye.
Councilmember Snyder,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pappen,
Yes.
Mayor Fung.
Aye.
The special and continued minutes of August 6th passed by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you so much. And we don't have any oral reports from city committees or commission chair tonight, and that move on to public communication. And this is the portion of the agenda that is reserved for those who wish to comment on any item not appearing on tonight's agenda. However, a speaker must address subject matter within the jurisdictions of the City Council. Every speaker will have 3 minutes tonight. The speaker is to address directly to the entire council, not individual council members, nor the public. And I have 2 speaker slips, and then we will start with in-chamber speaker. And if there's any other hand raised on the Zoom afterwards, we will call on you after the in-chamber speaker. The first one we have tonight is Mr. John McAuliffe.
Good evening, Council. One thing I'm hoping that we can address is the parking here in downtown Millbrae. I hope it doesn't become a fiasco like it was in San Bruno. I hope you've learned from their mistakes. If we do parking where we have to pay, I would hope that would be on a per 5-minute basis. You can pay for increments of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and not as they had, where you had, I believe it was a 1 hour minimum of $2.50. And if you want to buy a $1 donut, you pay $2.50 to park to do it. The other thing is I agree with Councilwoman Ann Schneider that I hope we could annex, if we're getting some extra income, Cappuccino High School and the parcel of land by the airport, and that would help us out. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. Appreciate your comment. Next up is Shaman Ranji.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My comments are with regards to the process that led to the appointment of 2 city council members. I am a Millbrae resident. I live in District 2, and I am here to express my disappointment at the process that led to the appointment of Ms. Riley as the council member for my district. I think that the process was entirely undemocratic. The existing council members should not have supported the recall election that led to my elected representative, Angelina Cahalan, being recalled. But compounding that by refusing to support another election was extraordinarily disappointing, especially since in 2 weeks we face a presidential election where the future of democracy in this country is literally at risk. To see a truly undemocratic process followed to appoint council members without the opportunity for the community to speak was very, very disappointing to me. I would also like to add that I do not believe that Ms. Riley, with all due respect, is an appropriate representative for my community. I understand that there was and continues to be a great deal of controversy about the proposal to have permanent supportive housing at the La Quinta Inn. And as a community, I believe that we should have had a respectful dialogue between those who supported the proposal and those who opposed it. But the truth is that the group that opposed the proposal, which included Ms. Riley, has engaged in inflammatory rhetoric that engaged in the worst types of stereotypes towards unhoused individuals and displayed little to no compassion for the less fortunate members of our community. I do not believe that those are appropriate values for a council member who should be representing the entire community, and I'm very, very disappointed at the process that led to those values being espoused by the rest of the City Council. I do note that one member of the City Council, Councilwoman Schneider, did support having an election, and I would like to thank her for doing so. But overall, I believe that the process that led to Ms. Riley being appointed as the council member for my district has left many of us in District 2 feeling unrepresented. And I believe that this is a process that really does not speak well for Millbrae and does not speak well for the City Council's dedication to supporting all of Millbrae instead of just a small segment of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Renchi. Thank you for your comment. I don't see any hand raised online. City Clerk, can you confirm?
That is correct, Mayor. There are no hands raised online.
Thank you very much. That brings us to an end to our public communication this evening. And moving on to consent calendar, I've received a request to pull item number 6. Any council member or the member of the public want to pull any items? Okay, seeing none. How about a motion to approve item 5, 7, 8, and 9? Okay, we have a motion to approve item 5, 7, 8, and 9. Yeah, absolutely. Can we get a second, and then we'll make sure we get.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. So consent calendar on item, would you, City Clerk, 5, 7, 8, and 9, would you please brief the public?
Sure. You want me to read the consent?
Yeah, just the
item?
headline, correct.
Okay. Number 5, receive and file monthly general fund financial report for the period ending September 30th, 2024. Action. Item number 6, approve by
7.
Item number 7, reject by motion the 4 bids received for the Bayside Manor renovation project rebid. Action. Item number 8, adopt a resolution authorizing environmental programs to apply for and accept all available Cal Recycle funds from October 22nd, 2024 through October 22nd, 2029. Action. Number 9, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager or designee to 1, award a contract with GHD for the design of the digester valve and the pipe replacement project. Number 2, establish a contingency budget of $21,870. Number 3, establish a total project budget of $167,669. And number 4, authorize the expenditure up to the total project budget. Action.
Thank you so much. Any public comment on 5, 7, 8, and 9? Okay, seeing none, would you please do a roll call, City Clerk?
Certainly, Mayor. Councilmember Nguyen.
Here.
Councilmember Riley.
Aye.
Councilmember Snyder.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pappen.
Yes.
Mayor Fung.
Aye.
Consent items number 5, 7, 8, and 9 passed by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you so much. Item number 6, which is approved by motion, a request from the Peninsula Family Service Scott Wheel Program for the use of the Recreation Center, Greg Hall, and a fee waiver for an afternoon event for current God Wheels participants on December 5th, 2024. Councilwoman Ann Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. I asked for this to be pulled mainly so that the public will learn about this particular program. If you are over, and is it 67 or 65, you can qualify for getting a ride anywhere within 5 miles of your home for $5. Now, I have an elder that you've heard me talk about, and it seems inevitable that Kaiser creates an appointment for her when I have to be in 2 other places. And I hate not taking my mom and picking my mom up. But we have used this service a couple of times. And for all the caregivers out there, where I know you feel guilty because I feel guilty, please come to this event, and it is on December 5th at the Recreation Center, and sign your family up for that. It's great for an emergency. They know how to bring you in. And really, this is a terrific program by Peninsula Family Services. And I just encourage you, it's been closed for about a year. It's now opened up for new people. Please learn about this and take a little bit of pressure off of all of you caregivers. My heart goes out to all of you, as well as our older loved ones. But a great program. I am happy to support this, and I'm really glad that the city is doing it.
Okay, thank you so much. Any further comment on item number 6? I entertain a motion?
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Any
Pappen, second.
We have a second from Vice Mayor Pappen. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Nguyen,
Aye.
Councilmember Riley,
Aye.
Councilmember Snyder,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pappen,
Yes.
Mayor Fung.
Aye.
Consent item number 6 passed by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you so much. And tonight, for public hearing, we don't have any item on public hearing tonight. Moving on to existing business. Item number 10, approve by motion to accept the recycled water feasibility study and alternative analysis report. And City Manager, could you please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to introduce our city engineer, Mr. Ahmed Haya, for a staff presentation. And before we get started here, this is a pretty technical report, but a very important report. And so a lot of information, and most importantly is we'll get into discussion as to how we make this a feasible project. So you'll take note of some of the economics. But so with that, I'd like to introduce our city engineer, Mr. Ahmed Haya, for a quick introduction.
Good seeing you, Ahmad.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. My name is Ahmad Haya. I'm the city engineer. I'll be presenting and introducing the study of the recycled water and alternatives analysis report. On March 12, 2024, the City Council received a draft study on the recycled water feasibility and alternatives analysis report. Since then, the study has been updated to respond to specific comments and questions raised by council. This study was conducted by the city's consultant, West Yost, who is joining us tonight. Representing West Yost is Rodora Yogtan, Bonnie Robinson, and Catherine Geese, who will present the details of the study. Before I turn it over to Rodora and the West Yost team, I will give a brief background and a purpose of the study. The purpose of the recycled water feasibility study and alternatives analysis report is to evaluate the feasibility of developing and implementing a recycled water program in the city to produce distributed, disinfected, tertiary treated water for unrestricted irrigation purposes. This will offset potable water demands of existing customers and projected future development. The study presents a feasibility assessment, which involves identifying potential recycled water customers, finding total recycled water demands, exploring opportunities for regional partnership, finding recycled water treatment facility recommendations, identifying a project that will provide a new alternative water supply source for the city, and which hopes to improve the city's water supply reliability, identifying a project that will reduce nutrient discharge in the San Francisco Bay. The study will be submitted to the regional board next month in November. The study will also serve as the basis for the city to pursue additional state grants, federal grants, and low-interest loan opportunities. It also serves as a guide for the city should it decide to move forward with a recycling water program. Without further ado, I would turn it over to West Yost.
You hear me?
Yes.
Let's get closer to the mic.
All right.
That'll be good.
Is that good?
Yep.
So, good evening, Mayor Fung and City Council members. I'm Rodora Biogden, and tonight our team will be presenting the city's recycled water feasibility study and alternatives analysis report. Presenting along with me are Bonnie Rosen, the project engineer, and Catherine Geese, our treatment expert, and she's joining us virtually. We noted that we have new members in the City Council since the March 12 study session conducted for the report. So tonight, we're going over quite a bit of background, and the presentation will look very familiar to several of you. In tonight's presentation, we will present drivers for recycled water, potential recycled water demands, distribution system and treatment systems, a recommended project, and an implementation plan. In the March 12th study session, we received the questions listed here in this slide. As we proceed through the presentation, you will see these questions and comments, and we will address them as best as we can. Slide. So before we start, we want to make sure we understand what recycled water we've evaluated in this report. Recycled water is evaluated in this report as highly treated wastewater effluent reclaimed for the purpose of beneficial non-drinking uses. In this slide, and in the next couple of slides, we will address City Council's previous question of how would recycled water help impact the average Millbrae resident? In general, go back. Thank you. In general, the average Millbrae resident would receive benefits to improve the reliability of their drinking water supply, especially during drought years, and require lower water conservation. So they would decrease the amount of conservation they would have to undertake during droughts. It would also help reduce future cost of wastewater treatment as regulatory requirements evolve. So remember that the city's sole water supply source is SFPUC, and they import water from Hetch Hetchy. The city has several drivers for recycled water, one of which is water supply benefits. It diversifies and increases the city's water supply portfolio. As more frequent droughts occur, the City Council has made improving the city's water supply resilience a priority. So recycled water has been identified as an opportunity in the city's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, and it's been included in development-specific plans. Recycled water also provides benefits to the city's wastewater treatment plant. It helps reduce treated wastewater effluent, discharged, and nutrient loading to the bay. It also helps the city with future-proofing with evolving regulations by getting credits for nutrient reduction by using recycled water. It would also offset the cost of future nutrient removal facilities at the city's wastewater treatment plant. The reason this study was conducted in recent years is that the state and federal government have made recycled water funding available. This reduces the cost for the city to consider a recycled water project. Next slide. Here, we show how recycled water benefits the city's water supply, especially during times of water shortage, such as drought. This slide shows the city's projected demand and available supply during the worst dry year through 2045, as reported in its 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. The city's water demand is expected to increase over the next 20 years, as shown in the red line. And in the worst dry year of a 5-year drought, water supply shortage is anticipated, as shown in the blue bars. The gap between the red line and the blue bars increase over time. To close the gap, the city residents would need to implement increasingly greater water conservation over time, as shown in the yellow dots. So if you're looking at 2045, the city's residents would need to reduce their water use by 24% in the worst dry year. In the next slide, this is essentially the same graph as the previous slide. The addition of recycled water to the city's water supply portfolio, shown here in purple, would reduce the needed water conservation so that the city's residents would not need to conserve more than 18% in the worst dry year in 2045. It would help maintain the quality of life in the city and keep your landscape assets alive. Next slide. So, as Ahmad described, the city conducted this feasibility study to explore what a recycled water project could look like. The study included identifying potential recycled water customers, defining the total recycled water demands, and exploring opportunities for regional partnership. It identified a project that would provide a new alternative water supply source for the city, and the city received $150,000 in state planning grant funds for the project. This study is due to the State Water Board by November 30 of this year. I will now turn the presentation over to Bonnie, who will discuss the potential use for recycled water and how it could be distributed to users.
Good evening, Mayor Fung and members of the council. Next slide. So to begin, we'll take a look at recycled water demands identified for this potential system. For this project, we explored the use of recycled water for non-drinking water uses only. This included identifying existing irrigation consumers within the city, as well as some active development areas for potential future connection to recycled water. Based on historic irrigation and estimated development water demands, the total average day demand estimate for recycled water within the city would be 170,000 gallons per day. This includes key customers like the Country Club, which is the largest irrigation user within the city, schools like Mills High School, parks, commercial development along El Camino Real, and some larger multifamily developments. The Country Club and any of those private customers, especially larger users, could be considered for development of a public and private partnership, which could be developed to the mutual benefit of both of those agencies to share costs. Slide. As part of this project, we also spoke with potential regional partners that the city could partner with to develop either a more regional recycled water system or provide recycled water to as a customer. Burlingame, San Bruno, and Caltrans were identified as the most likely potential partners due to their proximity to the city. However, at the time of these conversations, none of those agencies were able to commit to a partnership with the city. Burlingame has also since begun development of its own recycled water feasibility study this year. Other agencies like South San Francisco, the airport, and the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission were identified as less feasible opportunities due to distance or the agency's own identified demands for recycled water. At the time we were speaking with these regional partners, the One Shoreline project was still in early development of its feasibility study. This project could be a potential partner in the future as they continue to develop their study, and those One Shoreline demands, if needed, could be for irrigation or potential environmental enhancement. Although none of these agencies were able to commit to a partnership with the city at the time of these discussions, a number of them did express interest in future conversations, and it's recommended that the city stay in continued communication with these agencies to identify any potential partnerships and customer opportunities as recycled water projects in this region move forward. Next slide. Once we identified those potential recycled water demands within the city, we were able to move forward with developing a conceptual distribution system. West Yost developed this conceptual layout of pipelines to serve those key customers within the city, since we're not looking at those partnerships at this time. This included the main recycled water pipelines. The distribution system was separated into two main phases, phase 1 shown in green and phase 2, which is the 4 separate purple areas. The phase 1 would reach all those identified priority sites within the city: the Country Club, City Hall, El Camino Real, Mills High School. Phase 2 would reach most of the remaining identified customers. There are a few existing irrigation users shown in the small gray dots that were excluded due to distance from other users as they were deemed not cost feasible to serve. Phase 1 of the distribution system would also include construction of a storage tank and pump station at the city's existing courtyard that would take treated effluent from the water pollution control plant and distribute it to the rest of the city. The second phase in those 4 individual segments, A through D, those are separated out because each of those individually would require their own small pump station and treatment plant, or pump station and tank. Those are not shown specifically on this map because there's not specific sites identified for those, but all of those costs have been included in our capital costs. Can you click once more? I think there's a table that shows up here. Perfect. Thank you. The total demand served by each of these systems, by the total distribution system, would be approximately 167,000 gallons per day, with a maximum day demand during those high summer months of 418,000 gallons per day. Phase 1 has an estimated capital cost of $27.2 million, and the remaining Phase 2 capital cost would be an added $5.7 million. Next slide. Based on that conceptual layout, we separated this into 2 alternatives for the city to consider. The first would be to only develop Phase 1 and not plan on Phase 2. This would serve those priority customers within the city and about 82% of the city's existing irrigation demands. This provides 50 million gallons per year of recycled water and would offset approximately 7% of the city's existing potable water demand. The second alternative would be to construct both Phase 1 and 2, supplying 61 million gallons of water per year and offsetting 9% of the city's potable water use. The recommendation for this would be to expand Phase 2 incrementally along with other projects in each of those individual regions to take advantage of potential cost sharing with other construction projects. As noted here, Phase 1 alone would be $27.2 million, with Phase 1 and 2 being a combined $32.9 million. I'll now pass it over to Catherine to speak about the treatment system alternatives.
Good evening. Next slide, please. So with the treatment facility and looking at the capacity of the plant, we looked at it also in a phased approach, with the first phase being facilities that would accommodate the majority of the city's demands, about 400,000 gallons per day or 0.4 million gallons, or million gallons a day, or MGD. And as Bonnie showed, that is equivalent, a little bit less than the maximum day demand for the Phase 1 and Phase 2 projects. Then we looked at also what it would take to expand that capacity to double it. And that would accommodate the rest of the city's demands, as well as demands that were identified for potential partners with the city. And then finally, from a space planning layout, we looked at what it would take to accommodate up to 1.6 million gallons a day, thinking further into the future of what could be possible at the site, given the constrained space available. Next slide, please. The other big factor that we considered in the analysis was the potential for nutrient limits. As you're probably aware, the San Francisco Bay has been identified as being impaired with respect to nutrients. And dischargers throughout the Bay are being asked to look at reductions. Right now, there's the way the regional board permits requirements for nutrients could be either a concentration-based limit or a load-based limit. And how these limits are applied affects how treatment or how compliance can be achieved. With a concentration-based limit, basically the effluent quality has to meet a certain standard. And in order to meet a low nutrient standard with the city's treatment plant and the confined space that you have there, the city would need to construct what's called a membrane bioreactor treatment system. And that was identified through a study that the city did with BACWA, which was a big regional effort to evaluate options. And then that MBR, that treatment process, that bioreactor also effectively includes a filtration step, which then also produces recycled water. So if the city had a concentration-based limit today and was using an MBR treatment process, you would be able to take that effluent directly, disinfect it, and use it as recycled water. With the load-based concentration limit, though, which is what we're currently faced with, the city just needs to reduce the nitrogen load that's being discharged to the bay. And so in that scenario, any reduction in flow or concentration can meet those limits. So by implementing a water recycling project, you're actually reducing the loads to the bay and moving your way towards compliance. And in that scenario, any kind of filtration technology would be acceptable because you would not be needed to provide any nitrogen removal in the treatment process. You're just reducing flow. So something like a cloth disc filtration system, which is much simpler, more cost-effective approach, would be viable. So these two potential future scenarios is what influence the development of our alternatives. And at this time, the city is looking at current load-based reduction limits and a possible future concentration-based limit. But those concentration-based limits are not likely to occur for at least another 10 years. Next slide, please. So as I said, we looked at both a cloth disc filter approach and a membrane filter approach to try to evaluate the cost of both strategies so the city could make a decision on which way to move forward. So with cloth disc filters, the layout of the site is shown here. There's the FIPS, which is the filtered influent pump station. You've got the disc filters themselves, and you can see is a very small footprint compared to, the overall site. From there, the water would flow over to the UV system, which is the disinfection process, into the TEPS, which is the tertiary effluent pump station, small chlorine addition system, and then out to the distribution system. So that would be the footprint of the recycled water project. And that could easily meet that whole entire footprint there could meet both the city's needs and it'd be expandable in the future all the way up to the 1.6 MGD. And the cost for the initial phase would be about $9.2 million with a $7.2 million life cycle cost. Next slide, please. But where things become a little more complicated would be if in the future the city had to construct an MBR plant. With an MBR plant, the city would have to convert all of the existing treatment aeration basins that are shown in those green spaces within the existing treatment plant. All of that would have to be converted to reactor space. And then membranes would have to be constructed outside of that footprint. And with the city site, it seems like there's some space there, but really that strip of land that I'm showing there is really the only available space to construct those membrane filters. And as you recall from the previous slide, that's exactly where we were showing where those cloth disc filters would be. So what this means is in the future, if the city had to go to an MBR treatment plant, all of that filtration system would be demolished to be then replaced by new membrane filters. And then some of that water from that MBR plant could be filtered off or taken off and sent out for water recycling, and the rest would then be discharged to the bay. Next slide, please. So with the membrane filter approach, the idea is to kind of start with the foundation of what an MBR treatment plant would look like. And so the city would build membrane filters within that footprint that we were talking about earlier. And those would be set up in a way that they would be expandable to a future MBR plant. And then this would allow the city to expand those membranes well into the future when and if that MBR treatment process is required. But this comes at a higher initial capital cost, about $19.3 million, and a higher life cycle cost. Next slide. But the big advantage here, as you can see from this slide, is that those membranes would just be easily expanded directly as they are built initially. So you would be basically working towards the ultimate future of this treatment plant with that first step. The other thing to note would be that that investment made now in membrane filters would offset a future cost of an MBR treatment plant. Next slide, please. So in thinking about which decision to make, whether to go with cloth disc filter or membrane filters, we took a look at what the impacts would be. So if you build cloth disc filters, then in the future, you'd have to abandon and an MBR system were required in the future. At that point, you'd have to abandon the filters, the polymer addition system, the influent pump station. But in the near term, you'd have a much lower operating cost. Whereas if you started with membrane filters, there would still be some infrastructure that wouldn't be applicable in the future, some fine screens and an influent pump station. But it would be much fewer lost assets. But the trade-off there is a higher initial operating cost. So our analysis showed that the cloth disc filter approach would result in abandoning facilities prior to their end of their useful life. But if nutrient removal was 15 or more years out, then maybe a cloth disc filter approach could be cost effective because the disc filters themselves have a life of 15 to 20 years. But with the membrane approach, even though it's a higher initial investment, that investment will offset future costs. Next slide, please. So looking at a side-by-side comparison between the cloth disc filter and the membrane filters, there were two different, we have alternative 1 and 2 with the cloth disc filter approach. One was, they're effectively the same. The real difference is how we look at what the MBR plant would look like in the future. But the bottom line here is that with both projects, you would install initially what was required to construct recycled water. In the initial step, if you went with membrane filters, it would be almost twice as expensive, about $29 million, and that is a total life cycle cost, which includes all of the operating cost as well as the initial construction cost. And then in step 2, though, that's where the benefit really pays off, because with the disc filters, you would have to effectively demolish more facilities to make room for membranes, whereas with the membrane filters, you would be building onto what you already have in place. Next slide, please. So given ultimately, the decision about which treatment approach to move forward with is a risk-based decision. What is the timeline for those future nutrient regulations, and how are they going to evolve? Over the last 2 years, we've seen a huge increase in the regional board's need and desire to regulate nutrients. When we first started this study, the talk was new limits are 5-10 years out, and right now the city's already facing a permit that requires some load reductions, so that could continue to evolve depending on the health of the bay. So the timing of that is really uncertain. But ultimately, right now, we're hearing concentration limits are 10 to 20 years out. Load reduction should be what folks are moving towards. So with that, the two options approach to decide between cloth disc and membrane filters came down to that risk-based decision. And based on input from staff, the recommendation is to move forward with the membrane filter approach because it provides an investment into the future and it reduces future cost of if a membrane is needed, if an MBR is needed. And then just to respond to a question from the work session, the question was, are membrane filters in use in the region? Is this something that could, be considered a unique or potentially more fundable project? And the answer is that membrane filters are a very common filtration process and step. There are several agencies right now in the area that are looking at MBR treatment or actually moving towards construction of that type of treatment. So it's not necessarily something unique or different, which also means it's not risky. But the flip side of that is it wouldn't necessarily make the city more qualified to receive funding. One other note I do want to make about the membrane filters that is, in terms of that future proofing, a final benefit is that if the city were somewhere down the road deciding to go towards some of the potable reuse opportunities that are being developed nowadays, membrane filters are much more aligned with that type of treatment. They're a very good first effective step towards some kind of more potable reuse strategy. And so again, starting now with membranes now is going to give the city a lot more flexibility down the road to implement lots of different options, whether it's improvements at the treatment plant for water quality or improvements outside to look at more advanced treatment for recycled water. Next slide. With that, I will hand it back to Bonnie and Redora.
So I'll now be looking, now that we've had both the distribution system and the treatment system, we'll look at combining this all together into what an ultimate project could look like. Next slide. So based on those, we've combined this into 4 main alternatives that we looked at. This is the combination of both those 2 distribution system alternatives and those 2 treatment alternatives. We've already kind of highlighted what those recommendations would be. We still want to outline all those different recommendations. So you'll see here both the phase 1 and phase 1 and 2 for the distribution system and the membrane and cloth disc filters. The 25-year total cost for those projects range from $48.1 million to $65.7 million. And the annual cost per gallon ranges from 3.6 cents per gallon to 4.8 cents per gallon. You'll note that there are some cost savings per gallon when we add that second phase because those initial upfront infrastructure costs, the treatment plant, are spread across a higher number of customers. That highlighted alternative at the bottom is the alternative that we looked a little more in detail at, as it supports the full city demands and includes the membrane filtration system. As Catherine described, that system would set the city up well to meet future nutrient regulations. Next slide. We also then looked at the 4 alternatives across some more qualitative categories and criteria. This includes those lower upfront costs, whether we're serving more of the city demands, an increased potential for regional partners in the future, minimizing some of those lost costs like Catherine talked about with demolishing things that you may have more recently installed, and then the ease of expansion for future nutrient removal. Here, you'll note that that highlighted project really hits all of those except for that higher upfront costs. It serves more of the demands with phase 1 and 2, has a good potential for work with regional partners if that's an opportunity in the future, and sets the city up for that treatment system. Next slide. We also evaluated a no project alternative. This is one of the requirements from the state. And so this is considering what if the city chooses not to move forward with a recycled water program. The main benefit for this one is those saved costs, both for initial infrastructure costs and for maintenance and labor costs ongoing. However, there's a number of disadvantages without a recycled water program. There's certainly none of the reduction in environmental impacts that the recycled water system would supply. As mentioned earlier, the city also has a single water supply source from SFPUC, which makes it more vulnerable to any supply shortages. It's also important to note that whenever the city has reduced water supply availability, its neighbors likely have reduced water supply availability as well and would be unlikely or unable to supply additional water to the city. As Redora shared earlier, there are high dry year conservation requirements anticipated for the city, and this is only anticipated to become more stringent with continued changes to environmental regulations. Without the recycled water project, the city will also have continued discharge of nutrient-loaded wastewater effluent into the San Francisco Bay, which can be tied into higher costs for nutrient load reduction. I'll now turn it back over to Redora to wrap us up and present the recommended project.
So based on the quantitative and qualitative evaluation, the recommended project includes phase 1 and 2 of the distribution system. Phase 1 will deliver recycled water to most of the city's non-potable water users. And if you recall, phase 2 had 4 separate segments. Each alignment could be installed as opportunity allows, concurrent with other city projects in the same vicinity. It should be noted that the installation of phase 2 segments could occur after the 25-year life cycle. The recommended project also includes Stage 1 membrane filtration treatment facility, which would support city demands. It could be expanded should the city obtain partners. And it sets the city up for evolving nutrient management regulations and for potable reuse if the city should decide to move towards that. Next slide, please. So the estimated life cycle cost for the project is $65.7 million over a 25-year life cycle. That includes a capital cost of $50.8 million and an estimated annual O&M cost of $600,000 annually. In the study session, the City Council asked, what is the cost of recycled water compared to potable water? And that's shown in this table. Cost per gallon of recycled water is 75% greater than potable water cost if it's 100% funded by the city. The city could achieve some potential savings overall by reducing its wastewater disposal cost. And there's also the unquantified value of having an alternative water supply outside of SFPUC. These costs could decrease with regional partnerships and external funding. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we show how external funding could affect the city's cost share and cost per gallon of recycled water. External funding could include grants, low-interest loans, bonds, and partner cost shares. If the city could obtain approximately 50% external funding, recycled water costs could approach the same rates as drinking water. This does not account for the city's potential cost savings for getting ahead of addressing nutrient management regulations. Next slide, please. So in the next slides, we will talk about how the city could implement the project. Next slide. To implement the project, the city would undertake the following actions. It would undertake regional coordination and work with water suppliers in the region, such as through BOSCA and SFPUC. Work with San Mateo County LAFCo to establish a recycled water utility, and adjacent cities and agencies to develop partnerships. The city would need to take permitting and regulatory compliance actions. For example, working with Caltrans and Caltrain to obtain right-of-ways for the distribution system, and work with the State Water Board and the Regional Water Board to obtain a permit to produce and distribute recycled water. The city would also need to conduct market assurance and reach out to potential users to encourage or require the use of recycled water for non-drinking uses. The city would prepare an operational plan to efficiently and safely produce and distribute recycled water. And lastly, the city would need to explore project financing, seek potential partnerships externally, consider public-private partnerships, and internal funding, including bonds and rates. Next slide, please. In the study, we identified potential state and federal programs from which the city may seek funding. The gray boxes shown here show potential grant sources, and the clear boxes show potential loan sources, and the details are provided in the study. Next slide, please. This project could be implemented over a 5-year period if given dedicated staff resources and sufficient funding. As the city advances towards construction, the city would be pursuing external funding for planning and construction, conducting outreach to stakeholders and potential project partners, and conducting regional coordination. The city could start in the first year with reaching out to potential users to assure that it will have recycled water customers, procure a consultant to help guide and implement the project, start discussions with agencies from whom permits may be required, and start detailed planning studies and follow up with CEQA and NEPA. In subsequent years, the city would undertake a preliminary rate study, pre-design and then design, and Title 22 engineering report, which is required to obtain a permit to produce and distribute recycled water. Construction and startup could occur in later years. At the March study session, City Council commented that finance should identify external funding sources and conduct an analysis for potential bond issuance for the project. At this time, the project is at a conceptual stage and still need further development. And the city also needs to understand potential external funding sources. This effort could be undertaken in future years as the project is developed and more detailed cost estimate is prepared. I will now turn the presentation over to city staff.
Thank you, Wes Yost. So, as Rodor mentions, there's opportunities for additional grant funding, and we are presenting this to the state to submit it as a report as required by the grant that we have. So, the staff recommends that council approve by motion to accept the recycled water feasibility study and alternatives analysis report dated October 2024. Thank you. And we can now take your questions. I know there's a very technical presentation.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Does anybody want to begin with questions for our staff or our consultant here?
Well, maybe I can help out here a little bit, because I think
City
this
Manager?
is the crux of the feasibility of this. We can go back to the cost per gallon.
I mean, I have a list thing here, but.
And so I think, you know, and I think some of the discussion technically, you know, the cheaper one, more expensive one, and there was a third one, if you recall, back in March that was the most expensive. And it was decided upon because, you know, we're already seeing in the last 2 years regulations starting to tighten. And so the cost benefit of going with that middle option sets us up, even though it's $13 million more. I still think it's worth that long-term investment, because we know if we need to go to that, it's just going to cost us, you know, probably 3-4 times more based on inflation when we get there, right? So I think it's smart to do that, at least with staff's recommendation. So the challenge here is, as was mentioned, you know, it's 0.043 per gallon. That's not quite twice as much as potable water, but nobody's going to buy reclaimed water for almost, you know, 80% more than, or recycled water 80% more than potable water. So I think if the challenge here is to go after grant funding at that level of 75% grant funding, and as you know, usually grant funding requires a 25% match, or go for 70% grant funding with a 30% match. So we work on those bottom two, so we get that price per gallon down.
No more than 20 cents a gallon.
Exactly. So that's the challenge that we have in front of us for feasibility and funding.
So if you could just go back one more slide, Ahmad. I think that's the slide where cost of the portable water, I think that's 25 cents. So, 2.5 cents. 2.5 cents per gallon. And right now, if it's 100% city funded, it's 4.3 cents. And one slide forward. Okay, so at 30% city funding, so that would be roughly about, say, 25% off from the potable water.
Exactly.
You got to get to a point where it's economically feasible and attractive for those who wish to use it. I'm going to start with some questions here. Do we have any intelligence on whether our neighboring cities have any needs on recycled water? I mean, certainly they have needs, right? But, you know, whether or not where they are on that cycle in terms of implementations, and that would help determine the load that we're trying to serve.
I think we have some information on that, and it's continuing to evolve, Mayor, but I'll bring the consultant up because there has been some research.
I heard something about saying Burlingame is doing something. Go ahead. Get close, please.
Burlingame is looking at recycled water. Burlingame is looking at recycled water
Right.
for their own area, and one of the options that they should be considering is potential partnership with the city of Millbrae. We did speak with them as part of this project. and
Almost like
they're-
a joint recycled water district,
Yeah.
almost?
And I think that, you know, when Key was still around, the previous Public Works Director, he was speaking with them also. So there's been discussions in the past to move this, a partnership forward. And they've done an earlier assessment of recycled water for their treatment plant also. SFO is also doing a recycled water project. They've received grant funding to recycle their projects, and they're moving forward with that.
To recycle their project?
I mean, to recycle their wastewater effluent.
Okay.
And so they have a project that's moving forward to do that.
How much funding did they get, do you know?
Unfortunately, I don't have that off the top of my head.
That's interesting. Okay. I do believe that in order for this to be, I guess the economy of scale is kind of important here, so that, you know, some sort of, hate to try to copy, but central county, you know, recycle water district type, you know, initiative, where a few cities coming together and doing this collectively might make some economic sense, certainly, and then at the same time using that collective representation and try to go after some federal funding here. Whatever happened to the $800,000 funding I think we received from the Fed, Congresswoman Jackie Speier while she was in office?
Yeah, so great question, Mayor. So that sets us up then for the next phase. I think there was a slide on the timing for the design. So this helps kickstart that design phase that gets us even closer then to being able to compete for grant funding.
Mm-hmm.
So that money's been earmarked. It's been in our account for engineering design.
Yeah, because I think there are several things, certainly. There's the part where multi-jurisdiction can come together to form a JPA to put this effort together. That increases our demand, increases our capability to get funding. And then at the same time, looking at perhaps some local ordinance or legislations to help foster demand. You know, dual plumbing, right, for one, you know, on a certain size of landscaping area that requires, you know, recycled water usage, and being another, newer development, you know, mixed use, you know, larger residential requiring that dual plumbing as part of that. You know, on top of my head, I think you have a slide there that talks about the usages of it, right? Did you have that? I remember Ahmad talked about that. There are various different usage of it, certainly. I mean, as part of the policy development moving forward here, we certainly need to couple our strategy with legislation so that, you know, we need to effectively create those demand so that, and the point of that is not only to make sure that there is demand for it, but at the same time to conserve our valuable natural resources, which is drinking water. As we continue to get more demand for housing, when we're not building fast enough, and Millbrae is for housing, I want to make sure everybody understands that. And we just approved 99 units of affordable housing on 1301 Broadway. That in order for new residents to come in, we need to be able to feed them with real drinking water. So instead of flushing these water down the toilet. So that's an important element to make sure we have a continued sustainable, you know, housing development throughout the entire region. So I think those are kind of some of my initial comment at the moment. Go ahead, Councilwoman Schneider.
Just a little background. I am our representative to the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency and just went on a tour up to Hetchetchee. So Nicole Sankula, the general manager, just sent me the increasing water rates from SFPUC. So this year it's at $5.67 per 100 cubic feet. By 28-29, it's $6.64. So again, if we look at the cost of potable, drinkable water, that cost is going up too. The other thing, and Nicole's going to send it to me, they showed us a slide that had all 24 water districts and their reliance upon the Hetchy water system, where we are 100%. Now, as a kid who grew up here, yay, that is the best water in the world, people. It is absolutely, it touches no human hands. It is fabulous. But most of the districts do have multiple sources of water. And what that means is the risk to your system. So looking at recycled water is a way of potentially reducing risk in those drought years. The other thing that we've talked about at the water district, SFPUC is looking for other water supplies. They're doing a project in Daly City. They're looking at a project with San Bruno, which relies heavily on well water, but you have to replace the water in the aquifer. That's where I'm hoping our stormwater project, if we ever get the East Side specific plan, could be an asset to that. And it makes me wonder if when you said SFPUC is doing their own water, they have well water here in Millbrae. I don't like well water, only because I'm afraid of subsidence. They told me last week, and don't worry about subsidence, which means the ground sinks when you collapse the aquifer. But I worked for San Jose when parts of San Jose sunk by 3 feet. So that's my background. But Nicole's going to send us that map for comparison on that. San Francisco was also, as did Bosqua early on, invested in the Los Vaqueros enlarging reservoir, which is over in the East Bay. And sadly, that project became non-feasible. So San Francisco is going to be looking for additional water supplies to augment in drought years, but also to augment if the Bay Delta decision comes through and all of us lose water. And again, that's that big elephant sitting out there with what will happen with the Bay Delta plan. So every city, every water district is looking at that on there. And, even SFPUC, I'm encouraging them, invest into Millbrae, which is an option on there. But they are going to be, especially with that Los Vaqueros, that was a lot of our policy meeting discussion 2 weeks ago, is really sad on that, but sometimes you invest a lot of money. For Bosqua, it was $400,000. We dropped out fairly early on in the project, but SFPUC has invested several million into that. So that's kind of that risk in there. But I've got the chart of the water rates for the next 5 years on that. I had one kind of dumb technical question. Again, I got to spend time with SFPUC staff and talk about recycled water, and it's the salt content. So if we're using recycled water on landscape, and apparently Mountain View is looking at the salt content, will the system be able to clean up salt, remove salt, so that it's okay for, say, redwood trees, which apparently is the Mountain View situation right now?
There would have to be additional treatment to remove salt from the recycled water, and perhaps Catherine can answer this a little bit better than me.
Yeah, I can. If the salts in the recycled water were elevated to a level that were hazardous to redwood trees, for example, which could be fairly sensitive, there would be sort of a couple different ways of accomplishing, reducing those salt levels. You could blend the recycled water with some potable water to bring the level down. That may be the most cost-effective strategy, depending on how salty your water is and what you're irrigating and how much of that is, say, redwood trees that's really sensitive versus something that's not. But the only way to remove salt from any water is using a reverse osmosis treatment process, which is can be an expensive treatment strategy, but that is what that they're doing in Mountain View to reduce the salt in their recycled water to address that problem. So that is an option where you wouldn't treat 100% of the flow with that, but you would treat enough of it to remove all the salt from part of the flow and then blend it back together. So that would be another option. But, again, you'd have to really look at what you're irrigating and how much of that are really sensitive crops to salt, and then how much salt is in your water and whether it would be an issue before you would
Okay.
decide what the right strategy is for that.
And that's also what San Jose, Santa Clara Water Plant is doing. I did their virtual tour, but I haven't toured it. Okay.
Yeah.
That was just a question that came up. In terms of when I was reading this and trying to figure out how to bring the cost down, obviously we should be looking at grants, but the city is also working on hiring a consultant to do the East Side specific plan, which I think is a way that we can monetize, get mitigation money from projects outside the city to come into the city. And that's a way that we can help redo Highline Canal for sea level rise and things like that. I think it's also a way that we might partner with SFO to turn some of that pretty denuded upland seasonal wetlands into retention ponds. And PG&E here in Millbrae did a project and they had to mitigate it, and they sent the funds for that down to Pescadero to help red-legged frogs and garter snakes. And what they did was build ponds and islands so the snakes could go up in the rainy season and there'd be more habitat for frogs. We could do the same thing here, but then in the dry season, we could additional market for our own water is whatever we do on the east side. This is me making things more complicated, and I understand that, but I'll be gone in 2 months, so you won't have to listen to me. But we are heavily noise impacted. And the work that we've done with SFO Noise Roundtable is vegetation can reduce noise and particulate pollution. If we could partner with Sam Trans for 101 and SFO for some of that land, we could do some forest restoration. That's why I bring up redwood trees. They and spruce trees happen to be the best ones for absorbing sound. Who knew? But there you go. And we could be doing storm or noise prevention or noise mitigation along with this by using our recycled water. So it's an additional market. In terms of San Bruno, there has been no discussion of San Bruno looking at recycled water. They've got a bond measure, I believe, on the ballot right now for over $1 billion of infrastructure improvements. And, I have occasionally ridden to Bosco meetings with San Bruno. I don't see them looking at that anytime soon. So I think that that's worth doing. We are paying Caltrans to put that little piece of land by our plant. Could we eminent domain that land for a higher purpose and stop paying that lease? Can we make that land a little more valuable? I just got a couple of ideas. I won't take our time for that. But I do think that our habitat conservation plan could be a way to monetize it. And I also wonder, as we work on, I'll be talking about it under council comments, 101 overpasses in terms of how to bring the piping system over 101 or the developer agreements around BART station to get those piping systems up. So we may be able to use multiple projects to cut the cost. And I know you're all smart enough for that. But when I was going through it, I go, we are on the top priority list for a bike pedestrian pass over 101. We're one of the most congested interchanges in the Bay Area. If we could tie that in with a water delivery system, maybe we get our cake and eat it too. So just a little creativity there, which I know you guys have. I personally am support in doing it the right way. Oh, I should say the last thing that the water district is really looking at, and for all of us out there, every water district is waiting for the new guidelines for what you have to remove from the water. They're looking at PFAS, forever chemicals. We were talking more about phosphorus and nitrogen, which to me is kind of easy. PFAS are much more complicated and some of the other things. So to me, going for a system that has the flexibility to remove those really much more difficult materials is the smart way to do it. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation.
Vice
And
Mayor?
a complicated staff report.
Thank you. Try to be quick on some of these. So we have not yet identified users for this.
We have identified large users, yes.
The large
Like
users. So
Caltrans,
they're
yes,
on board.
in the-
So
in the
does
golf
that
course.
mean they will be saving money and we're paying for all this? Or are they going to partner up? The golf course, the high school. It's,
They will be paying, yes, they will be paying, but how do you phrase that? That's,
Well, if I may, Mayor, so
Yeah.
that's a great question, Councilmember, and that's where the, 4.3 cents per gallon versus the 2.5 cents per gallon. So Greenhouse Golf Course isn't going to pay 4.3 cents for potable water, for reclaimed water when they can buy potable water for 2.5 cents. But we know they're already complaining about 2.5 cents. They want to bring that cost down. So the only way to do it is really through some heavy subsidies. And I think some of the discussion of the council, there are intangibles here, right? But that's why I'm saying the goal to go out and get 70% or 75% grant funding, a 25% or 30% match for us on that grant funding. This table shows that we're still then feasible to market and sell reclaimed water at, 2 cents a gallon or 1.8 cents a gallon. So our challenge is to bring that not to bring the capital costs down because we can't, but it's to find ways to subsidize it. The other question I don't know, and maybe this is something we need to look at or it could be answered, and I don't mean to spring this on the staff, but to Councilmember Snyder, I just learned that SFPUC is sinking wells also in Millbrae. I did not know that till I met with them.
Yep, and they're
So I don't know
actively pumping.
If groundwater recharge is something that we can look at, or if we looked at on what the demand might be there for additional customers. So just food for thought on that, because I know down in the South Bay, groundwater recharge is a very hot topic, and something San Jose treatment plant has been able to sell. So something we can also take a look at to Councilmember.
Well, whose water are they pumping? Is it our water or their water?
They have the rights to it. So it's Millbrae groundwater, but they have the rights to it.
Who has the right to our groundwater? I'm sorry.
SFPUC. So there are 2 wells over near, off of, between El Camino and the railroad tracks. I did not know that. I just learned it. So anyway, my point here is I don't know if groundwater recharge is even an issue in San Mateo County or another source of demand, something we can look into perhaps.
Yeah, let's just.
Hold on 1 second. I'll let her finish first. Anything else?
Yeah,
Vice
I
Mayor?
got some things here.
Okay, go ahead.
So, yeah,
Just
I
wanna make
mean,
sure we-
let's just make sure they're on their land, not ours. Because they charge us for everything here. So, I mean, the big question here, I mean, this is a huge price tag. Sounds like a huge unfunded mandate at this point. And what do the residents get out of this? Because no matter what, we always hear, and we feel it too, my water bill is so high. Are the residents getting anything out of this investment?
Yeah, I mean, again, you just have to drive through Millbrae and you look at all the brown lawns, right? People aren't buying water, elasticity, whatever you want to define it as. And so that's something I also want to look into. Side note is once our water prices get so high, is it better to bring down the price because they're going to be selling more water at a lower price and actually have more revenue? We saw that, I think it was, a 26% reduction in water during some of the, worst drought times that we've all experienced. That also equates to 26% reduction in our water revenue, right? And so this is a really good thing, and there's intangibles, and you can put an economic value to the intangibles. The challenge is how do we get it funded, and outside funding, augmentation, federal, state, to buy that down, so then we can sell it at a reasonable rate that would be attractive.
So, yeah, what the mayor recommended here. Can we do a special district with our neighboring cities?
I think it's something that we can certainly look into and see what the interest is, and then see what the cost benefit of that is.
Jolene's gone.
The problem is, I mean, as you know, right, each of these small
Don't want
cities-
problems, I want solutions.
Well, we're.
Okay, go ahead.
We're giving you solutions, we're saying here's how we do it, and it's a challenge. But the problem that we have and the solution we're trying to identify is it comes down to cost benefit, right? So a city of our size, 23,000, even Burlingame at, what are they, 33,000 or something? You're not getting the economies of scale because sewer treatment plants are expensive. And so when you're divided that by 23,000 versus, 50,000.
We got to look a little further here.
Exactly. So as our population grows,
Yeah.
and we're able to get that, that's another element to this feasibility study where, we're at $23 here, but as our population grows and we get more economies of scale, that cost, and I think you have a chart that actually showed that, but.
We also have to look at if we were to do some sort of a districting, right?
Yeah,
Size of population,
Right.
right?
So, I mean, this is just another aspect.
I just don't know if there's any cost benefit, but it's something we can look at.
We definitely have to look at, because I'm sure grants are more likely to be given if they're cross-jurisdictional,
Yes.
and that's helpful there. So, I mean, a couple of last things here. So if we're doing bioswells, or we have this project on El Camino Real, the center divides and stuff, if we are capturing that water in another way where it doesn't need to be treated, I mean, are we helping ourselves in this realm here? I mean, this seems, this is a huge investment. So I'm trying to find out here, I don't, from the experts.
Well, I think the mayor actually asked that question.
You mean in terms of storm drain?
Yeah, I think that's a
So,
question.
yeah, so I asked that question before, whether or not, how feasible would it be to capture the storm drain and feed that into the supply of these recycled water? I mean, it's seems to me that that's a cleaner source of water compared to the sewage water. But obviously, we have some infrastructure that need to be tied in, and also storm drain. I understand there is a seasonality to it that, in the wintertime, there were plenty of them. In the summertime, not so much.
Exactly, Mary. You touched on the point. It works in the rainy season when we may not need as much recycled water to water the lawns. And also it depends on the scale where it is. And you definitely do need to also expand the infrastructure for that. In terms of having storage facilities, capturing that and then treating that. So that also is something to be considered, and it makes it a little bit more complicated, but.
So we're talking about here, Orange Park in South San Francisco. You know what that's about?
I believe that's the regional project you're referring to, in terms of, back to this.
I believe they've built the park over
With
the
the
whole
wells, right?
system here.
Yes.
Are we able to do something that aids us in that way?
And I believe that was for water quality, rainwater quality, to meet some of the regional demands.
What was that?
The regional water quality that's for the MRP. So if you're referring to that project near, I believe it was 280 in South City, that was at Wells. That was a regional project, and that was to help meet some of our load limits on our permits for the stormwater.
No, I think you need to take a look at Orange Park. I mean, they've got a whole development they just did.
Oh, it's the development. Okay, no, I'm not.
Yes. So staff we need to look at alternatives here. This is not really penciling out. I get it, but
It needs more thoughts.
More thoughts, yes. More thoughts, more ideas.
I have one.
If I may, I mean, there isn't a recycled water plant in the world that I know of that actually pencils out. And so that's why it just doesn't. That's why you need these heavy subsidies. And government is in the business of not making money, right? Because if it worked, the private sector would be doing it and selling water like crazy, right? But this requires a heavy subsidy. That's the direct cost. But the intangibles that weren't quantified here, that weren't analyzed from the economic benefit of the intangibles, I think, are important to consider. They're not quantified for you today, but, maybe we can come back and do that. But I do believe that there are grant funding. I mean, it sounds like a lot of money. 37.5 million is the goal for grant funding. I mean, I know of cities, and I don't know what SFO did, that have received, upwards of 80 million in grant funding.
SFO?
Not SFO, but other cities. So, City of San Jose, for example. San Mateo itself, I think, received upwards of about $50 million in grant funding. I think their
on this topic,
overall treatment plant is hovering right around 130 million.
State or federal?
Combination of, they were very successful in the WIFIA program, which is a federal low interest loan program, but also a variety of funding sources and a significant amount of grant funding, as well as the low interest loan program from the federal government.
All right, so just point of order here.
And if I may, Mayor, just to show you that, I think that this cost at 4.3 cents is based on the state infrastructure revolving fund, which is at 2.5%. So this interest rate's at 2.5%.
So I got several things here, and I'll come to you.
Just,
All right, go ahead.
Vice Mayor Pappen, I think, asked about San Bruno. Yes, they pump from their aquifer. Yes, they have to fill it. It is on the list of projects, and that is why SFPUC is working with them. That aquifer, which I didn't know until last week, starts way up in Sunset and runs down through part of Millbrae. So, but we don't have claim to it, but the cities north of us do. I'm trying to think what else Councilman Pappen. Yeah, San Mateo has a big, if you guys will remember, you won't, Gina might remember, to put a cistern underneath the recreation center to capture the storm water coming from Tioga, which is at that F level of overflow over the gutter, but we didn't have the funding for it. So there are some cities looking at that, and usually it's because our dear friends, the baykeepers, are looking at their sanitary sewer overflows, and that's one of the reasons why San Mateo's plant has that big, big stormwater collection. Correct me, but the new data on forever chemicals, they are now tracking to ultrafine rubber particulates coming off of tires, which is going to make the treating of water that touches streets a little more problematic. It used to be lead, it used to be cadmium, I think was one of the big problems on that. You know, nothing is free without some kind of treatment. I had a friend who worked on San Mateo's stormwater program. So the other thing that this could be a savings from, Tom, and it's only in the wintertime, when we had those atmospheric rivers, we are second in line to discharge water through the shared pipe with Burlingame and South City. So if we are able to divert some of that water into a recycled system, that will keep us from having SSOs. I'm surprised we didn't get slapped because we had a number of SSOs a year ago on that. So there are some other ways of looking at that. The thing for the public to remember, I guess why I'm excited of this, we're taking a forever source of water from a treatment plant and using it for landscaping, which will save, if we're in a 5-year drought and our water allotment is cut by 50%, all of our residents will still have the best drinking water in the world. I mean, truly it is the best drinking water. So sometimes you have to kind of, when you're looking at your financing, look long range on that. And that's where the risk comes in. I hear the money part, and I think, given Millbrae's proximity to the airport, that we are a transit hub, that for decades, in fact, 100 years, Millbrae has paid the price for big industrial installations. We should qualify, and it's why I've been pushing in environmental justice, big grants to really bring the price down a lot. And I think we need to go that approach, but we could be an education center with people flying into SFO and coming to learn about recycled water. It's all how you pitch it.
If I might, okay, just to clarify here, Orange Park in South San Francisco has a capture, treat, and filter storm system. The whole park they did, which they got funding for. So I don't know how this plays into something, but we have developments coming. We're looking at all kinds of things here. And I don't, again, this is not my expertise in any way, shape, or form, but they were able to do that over an entire park, aquatic system, everything.
Yeah, and I believe they got Caltrans funding for it as well.
Okay, well,
Because they're in the
if anybody's
Caltrans
getting
watershed.
funding for anything, and if it plays into any of this, let's try.
Caltrain actually has money
Thank
to
you.
give away?
Yeah, that's part of their requirements, because they're discharging into that system, into the watershed.
All right, so I can only imagine that these recycled water is, one of the allowable use, suitable use is for fire sprinklers and for fire safety, I would imagine.
Fire hydrants?
So is there some sort of wildfire prevention grant program that would help, funding the distribution of these fire hydrant ready water? California has a lot of these fundings available.
We have a funding team that could look into that.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I think it seems to me that that's a creative use of it, certainly. Imagine you have new high, I wouldn't say high rises, I don't want to freak anybody out. Newer commercials, newer mixed-use buildings, newer residential type development where fire sprinkler systems can be fed with these recycled water, then perhaps see if there's possibility to bring some wildfire prevention grant funding into the picture. We need to identify all the industrial use of these water, certainly, between car wash and construction sites, and, there's Burlingame Country Club, our own Green Hills, and school district sports fields, perhaps even the Tanfran development in the future.
What about Caltrans if we're doing El Camino Real?
Sure, those,
Can
you mean
they be
like,
our partner?
you mean like a landscaping irrigation
yeah.
type?
Well, we
Yeah.
already have a plan for that. Shouldn't they be kicking in?
Yeah, so that certainly is nice to have. Let's find out how SFO get their funding and how much they get. Let's, tap that in. And we should also, City Manager, perhaps we should also put this item on our lobbyists in Sacramento as a work plan for next year. This is something that they could potentially look into. And certainly, last but not least, reaches out to Congressman Mullen's office to see what type of availability, if any, in order to make this a reality. And we'll go to Ann, and then we'll come back to Vice President.
No, just real quick. So is there a fee? We have new developments coming in. Is there a fee we can?
Impact fee?
Yeah, impact fee that this can be added on to.
Potentially in future, yes. We're not at that stage, yes, but we can look at that.
Okay.
I would say on our goal setting, we have both to do a nexus study on a climate change fee, which this would qualify, along with that childcare fee that you wanted, Vice Mayor. Question. Tonight, you're hoping you want us to accept the report, and then we move in the next phase. City Manager Lisa Goldman was on the trip with me last week, so we talked about recycled water and where Burlingame is, and right now we're ahead of them, which is good for us in terms of trying to get the funding on that. But do we have to keep moving forward? Until we have a project, it's hard to go grant fund shopping. So how much farther along do we have to be to where we're at the place? I know we're applying for some planning grants, it was in the staff report, but to that next phase, the actual capital costs, how far away? And what do we need to do tonight to keep us on that path?
Good evening, Councilman Snyder. We do have that $800,000 grant that we are going to use to go to the next phase, which is going to hopefully give us at least a 30% design, which we can showcase it to different grantors. And so we could say, hey, we're working towards getting a plan constructed. So,
okay.
When we get to that point and get designs out there, then we'll be working with any agency that has money to, provide us to the next phases.
Okay, so you're saying we're going to be at 30% design, and a lot of grants love that magic word, shovel ready. So let's just keep that in mind. The closer we can get to shovel ready, the better. Thank you.
All right, anyone else have any comment, questions? Councilmember Riley.
Hi. We have been experienced for drought in the recent year. I use recycled water my all trees surrounding my house for more than 10 years. To prepare for the possible next drought for Millbrae, I highly appreciate our staff have conducted such an extensive study. Thank you for your comprehensive report to provide a clear overview and the necessary information in assisting management in making informed decision. Thank you.
We good? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comment. Anything? Anyone else?
Yeah, just real quick. So there was two methods I caught earlier for filtration. I'm not a water expert, but just knowing as an engineer, I know when I design things, even for long-term cost savings, that there's unintended variations in those processes. Are there risks with that long-term? I think it was the non-cloth one. I forgot what the other one was, but membrane. Okay, so the membrane one. Are there situations where there could be unforeseen issues with that method, and then it would incur higher costs to service that?
I believe this, we asked if this has been used. It's not novel, so it's been done, but I would let Catherine or someone from West Yost to the specifics in terms of.
I can comment on that. So the way membrane filtration works is there's sort of a vessel that holds the filters, and then the membrane cassettes sit down into that vessel. And the membranes themselves and the filter technology itself, has like about a 15 to 20 year life, and at which point you have to replace those cassettes. And the technology for membrane filtration has been around for about 30 years or so. And we're starting to see a lot of those initial systems being replaced with newer generation membranes. And there has been some lesson learned over that time frame, where we're seeing more efficient systems, more efficient membrane media that are being used. And I would imagine over the next 30 years, we'll see even more advancements in that technology. But I would say in terms of unintended consequences, I think it's been around long enough. We've learned a lot of lessons as an industry on membrane filtration, and it really is, widely adopted technology at this point. So I don't think there's a lot of risks here in going with that, if that makes sense. And then, like I said, with the way the design is, there is that ability to upgrade the system. It's built in a way that you can upgrade to the newer technology within the system that we would design.
I see. Follow-up question is that for the cloth disc filters, do you see improvements with that technology and opportunities to use that and upgrade to the latest technology and thus save money on that?
Yeah, what we're seeing, it's very similar, but a little different with the cloth disc filters. With that, it's similar where there's a vessel and the filtration technology sits down in the water, and we're seeing advancements in the filter media. But at the end of the day, like cloth disc filters, the pore size, the size of the hole that the water moves through is always going to be bigger than it is in a membrane filter. The membrane filter operates under a higher pressure. So that's what I mentioned earlier about the membrane filter setting you better for more advanced treatment in terms of potable reuse. Groundwater recharge was mentioned, for example, earlier. You'd have to go through a membrane filter and then a more advanced filter technology to reverse osmosis. So the membrane filter sets you up more for that. So I think, kind of back to that question about, well, if there were unintended consequences, if you went with cloth disc filter and say 10 years from now, a potable reuse project was developed on the peninsula with multiple agencies, Millbrae would be well suited to fit right into a project like that. So like Valley Water is doing right now, and they're bringing, that tertiary water down to their plant to treat it. You would be really well suited for that kind of technology. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think both technologies are a similar level of maturity, are all well used. It really just kind of depends on, in each situation, you've got to look at the big picture of, what are your needs, what are your long-term needs, and kind of what's the right approach.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. If there's any other further comments, we need to pick public comment on this item. I don't have any speaker slip on this, and I don't see hand raised online.
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay. All right. Closing public comment on this item. If there's no more questions or comment, I'll take a motion. I can entertain a motion to accept the report. Anyone?
Approve.
You want to make a motion, yes. Councilmember Nguyen, to accept the report?
Approve by motion to accept the recycled water feasibility study and alternative analysis report.
Okay, thank you for the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we got Vice Mayor.
That's fine.
Yeah, we'll get you next time. And then, City Clerk, would you please do a roll call?
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Riley.
Aye.
Councilmember Snyder.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pappen.
Yes.
Mayor Fung.
Aye.
Item number 10 passed by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you so much. I think one of the key takeaway here is that we got to start the conversation at a regional level. if we want to make some headway on this.
Exactly, Mayor. Just in closing real quick, took a lot of notes here, still a lot of follow-up, and this is just the beginning, right? Get through this feasibility report, know the challenge we have in front of us, and we'll be bringing this back to the city council.
We got to get the strategy right first.
Yeah, right.
All right, thank you. Item 11, adopt a resolution approving an amendment to the franchise agreement with the South San Francisco Scavenger Company for additional services and terms. Ms. Andrea Papajohn.
Thank you, Mayor Fung, council members, Andrea Papajohn with the City of Millbrae. Next slide, please. Staff recommends that City Council adopt a resolution approving an amendment to the franchise agreement with South San Francisco Scavenger regarding the term and additional services. Next slide, please. The current franchise agreement is set to expire October 31st, 2025. That's approximately 1 year from now. Since we signed the contract, there have been a number of new state mandates that have impacted the services that are required by Scavenger, and I'd like to talk about a few of those. First one is SB 1383. In January of 2022, the state mandated some new requirements that impact our franchise agreement. One is we must provide organic waste collection services to all residents and businesses and adopt an enforceable mechanism, which we did. Secondly, we must comply with education, equipment, signage, container labeling, color, contamination monitoring, and reporting. And we are complying with that together, partnering with our hauler, Scavenger. And third, we must provide verifiably available organic waste capacity through December 31st, 2034. So with this impact of these new regulations, we received a letter in September of 2022 from South San Francisco Scavenger stating the city will not have verifiable available organic waste capacity as mandated by the state. And Scavenger at that time requested a contract extension. In April 2023, there was also another law called the Advanced Clean Fleets Rule by the California Air Resource Board, and it requires transition to zero emission vehicles, ZEVs, for all fleet, and that will impact Scavenger. They will have to transition their fleet of trucks to zero emission vehicles. Next slide, please. So city staff held 3 separate subcommittee meetings to present the proposed Scavenger annually renewable contract. These are the dates of the 3 meetings. Staff received feedback from the subcommittees that they wanted additional benefits for the residents and businesses. So we negotiated 4 additional services which benefit our residents and businesses, and Scavenger has agreed to those. Next slide, please. The 4 new additional services proposed are first, multi-family cleanups. So you may know you get single-family homes have cleanups twice a year. This will extend the program to multi-family cleanups for dwellings with 20 units or less. Secondly, no charge drop-off for e-waste, cardboard, cooking oil, batteries, fluorescent lamps to Blue Line transfer. This is another benefit for our residents. We often get calls of what they should do with their e-waste, their computers, their cardboard, and this additional service would be no charge for residents to drop off. Currently, it's a minimum of $38 fee. The third additional service is our code enforcement or city staff may schedule special collections or roll-off boxes in certain circumstances where we need an additional cleanup. And then the 4th additional service is compost distribution. Compost will be distributed by Scavenger 4 times throughout the year for residents to come and collect free. This is also very popular. We provide this service now, but this one would provide 4 times a year at no cost to the city. And then 2 weeks ago, on October 8th, we had a council study session to consider the amendment. We had feedback from the council member to consider additional roll-off boxes to help clean up the canyon, Canyon Creek. And so we spoke with Scavenger. They said they would add 2 additional roll-off boxes. So instead of 4, there would be 6. Next slide, please. So we recommend an amendment to the franchise agreement, an annually renewable 15-year contract extension. What this is a term that automatically extends for 1 year. 1 year passes and then additional years added on. The benefit of this is that will allow compliance with new state requirements that I mentioned. It will allow Scavenger to secure the lowest possible cost of financing, which is important to comply with some of these regulations. It will also allow Scavenger to lock in that organic, verifiably available capacity for the city, which is also a mandate through 2034. It will enable a transition to ZEV, zero emission vehicles, for their fleet. It will speed up the replacement of older non-compliant collection bins per the requirement of SB 1383, since if they have a longer term contract, they'll be more incentivized to get up to standard more quickly and make the investment. And finally, it's the most economical, cost-effective, cost-efficient option to ensure the city complies with the capacity requirements to 2034 and into the future. Next slide, please. So staff recommends the City Council adopt a resolution approving an amendment to the franchise agreement with South San Francisco Scavenger regarding term revisions and additional services. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Papajohn. Any questions and comment from this council? We are, but do you have anything at this council? Okay, anything?
I would only say thank you, South City Scavengers, for adding those boxes. It is my dream that we would get into those canyons and do some fire prevention work. So thank you so much. Thanks, staff.
Okay, unless there's any, okay, go ahead. Okay, Councilmember Riley.
Hi, I'm your customer for almost 30 years. I'm happy to see the new South City Scavenger agreement has so many new provisions that will help the city improve environmental sustainability. I'm looking forward to see a successful partnership between the city of Millbrae and the South San Francisco Scavenger. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Riley. They have been a great partner. We don't get complaints. They provide a great service. And we are pleased with these additional services as well. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Vice Mayor, you have anything? Go ahead.
Sorry, because I've heard the debris boxes.
Yes.
Because they always have to come from South City Scavengers.
Correct.
What's the, competitively, we analyzed
The price?
Yeah.
So yes, we have. There's in the franchise agreement, we are required every 3 years to do, Scavenger does a survey. They look at rates of 27 other local jurisdictions, and they compare the rates. I'm sorry, they take an average, and then they provide us 5% below the average rate.
Okay, thanks. Just because I got asked the question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. If we don't have anything else, I can go to public comment and then we can come back. All right. So the first speaker tonight is Mr. Lou Sandrini.
Mayor and members of council, you should delay approving the franchise amendment for the reasons I addressed in letters to you. At your last meeting, your action was to provide guidance and input for a future public hearing. There has not been any properly noticed public hearing. The last meeting cannot be considered a proper study session. The amendment was not available. 2 council members didn't even have time to read the staff report, much less anything else. There's no adequate public notice in any study session. How automatically extending the agreement every year with 15-year periods will affect the current rate-setting model in the current agreement have not been addressed publicly. It must be. This weekend, a well-respected Long Life resident told me when Doug Button was asked why the Reeboks rates were so high, Doug said these rates were increased above what they should be to offset and subsidize residential rates in the agreement provided for the subsidies. The resident also asked the city manager, got the same answers. Wrong. There is no agreement provision to provide for subsidies. In fact, for exclusive franchises should reflect the cost of services, and all parties are to be fairly and equitably treated with regard to rates. The ratepayer's expectation and public trust demands you address these before and as part of any addendum. So here we are tonight, with never having a public hearing as you were approved to have, never having a meaningful study session, the failure to study and consider interfaces between the addendum and the current franchise agreement itself. The current use of improper subsidies that violate the agreement, equity, and public trust, with no reason to amend the current agreement that would be responsive to all future regulations and laws. There is no convincing evidence presented by South Scavenger and validated by the city that Scavenger needs these amendments. We rely simply on Scavenger says it needs to something else, blah, blah, and the city picks it up and conveniently addresses it. And with regard to negotiations, all Scavenger offered, in some cases, services they already provide, and some services provided by Blue Line, not Scavenger. Scavenger's costs for these services offered in the negotiations are negligible in the context of their several $million-dollar amendment. At no cost to them, Scavenger wants to essentially lock up the city in perpetuity. This is not a good policy. Violates the public trust. You should delay the action until these problems are addressed. There's absolutely no need to hurry and take action.
Thank you for your comment. 3 minutes is up. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Okay.
Mayor, there are no speakers online, and there's no additional speaker slips.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right. Bring it back to the council.
So we're going to address some of the questions asked?
So would South Sea Scavenger be able to answer some of those questions or public comments? Thank you, Mr. Button.
Hi, Doug Button, President of South San Francisco Scavengers. One part that Mr. Sandrini said is that there's no reason to extend. Our contract has only about 1 year left. It expires October 31st, 25. We are not in compliance with the state mandates. I have to transition to electric vehicles. I don't have a guaranteed capacity for 2030 or until 2034. That's mandated. That's now. And 5 years from now, it's mandated that we go to our from 2034 to 2039. And it keeps going. So a term that doesn't cover that does not mean you have capacity. And the electric vehicle things, we're now looking at possibly spending as much, not just for Millbrae, but for Millbrae, South San Francisco, and Brisbane, probably at least $100 million to electrify our fleet. And that is not something you could do with 1 year left on a contract. It's impossible. I can't get financing. Maybe if I was a public company, but that's not what a private company is. And we're a small family business that actually started in 1914 in Millbrae, right on Hillcrest here. And I'm happy to say we're 4th generations later, we're still here. And we hope we get to stay.
A question about subsidies, I didn't quite comprehend.
I'm sorry,
Something was mentioned about subsidies, I didn't quite understand.
subleasing?
Subsidies,
Subsidies.
some sort of subsidies.
Sublease, we don't sublease anything.
Subsidies, adding on, like,
I didn't understand if I may, because he said I responded, I don't recall responding to anybody, but subsidies to.
I'm sorry, I'm terrible of hearing. I actually get my hearing
sorry,
aids
I
next
didn't-
week.
I didn't understand the question either. I think what it, if I
Go
can try
ahead.
to comprehend,
Mr.
I
City
think it
Manager,
was
go ahead.
subsidies of the commercial rates subsidizing
Yeah.
residential.
The
With
And the
debris
co-
box
and the cost.
subsidizing the,
I understand the question. With the debris boxes, it was brought up. Our rates 20 years ago were set differently. They were set through a formula that the city hired consultants, and they went through and studied all of our costs and set the rates. And at that time, they set the rates and there was some subsidies. We adopted a whole new schedule 16 years ago where we said, after all of this baloney of going and hiring consultants and spending a lot of time, we guaranteed that we said our rates were where they were at after being reviewed several times by consultants and confirmed, that we said we'll live from here out on 75% of the cost of living, and we'll mark to market to every 32 Bay Area cities around here that we will stay below the average rate. And there's no subsidy, no matter what. The rates are just set off of what everybody else's rates are set around us. And we've been fortunate that that has worked for the last 16 years here in Millbrae, 20 plus years in South City. The subsidies aren't there. The rates are high on debris boxes, but they're high all over the Bay Area. And the reasons being is there's a lot of material in there and they're trying to discourage people from making that much waste.
okay, thank you.
I promise I'll get to you in a second. So Mr. Button, perhaps you can address a little bit about, the length of the contract and how other cities have done it, that, based on your experience, and try to address some of that.
We have been under an annual renewable with South San Francisco for 20 years,
Okay.
Maybe 21 years or so. There's about 400 cities in California. Still half are collected by municipalities, LA, San Diego, Sacramento, things like that, some of the large cities, and a lot in the valley. Probably about half of the other half, the 200, is collected by large national companies, Waste Management, Republic, and all that. But in the case of the small independents, there's probably about 100 of us left. And out of that, about 40 or 50 of them actually have annual renewables because you can't get financing on a truck that costs $1 million with a year contract. And the idea, if you're happy with the service, and we think we provide good service, there's no downside to this. If you were willing to extend my contract by 1 year or 10 years, you still have the right to do that. And all we're asking is that it just, so we can keep financing and keep upgrading materials and upgrading trucks and upgrading bins and equipment and meet all the mandates that are out there, that we keep this going.
Okay.
And and there's still all the, I guess, the fail-safes with the city, that if we were to do anything wrong, if we cheated, if we were doing something wrong, you can take over our contract immediately. You have that right in the contract now.
Yeah, we don't foresee that happening.
Yeah, no, I hope not.
And so, okay, Councilwoman?
I've stated this before, that the power of having independent companies is a check on the big internationals, multinationals on there. Otherwise, we'd all have a single stream and we'd be paying pretty incredible rates. because it's changed a little bit from my days, how long is your amortization schedule on a garbage truck?
Like I said, garbage trucks are going, currently, the ones we use are about $700,000, and we amortize them over 10 years. They're going to be $1 million as soon as we electrify. And we may need 2 for every route. That's the problem here.
The reason I bring that up is that typically in garbage contracts, they have fairly long, there's not this 1-year annual renewal option. You have a much longer contract that you can base all your financing for very big, very expensive equipment. So I just want the public to understand that.
With our trucks right now, we use renewable natural gas, and we're going to have to transfer into electric vehicles. There's 3 tiers. The first tier is like pickup trucks and delivery vans.
The easy stuff.
The easier stuff that works. And we have to have 10% by 27. With the tier 3, which is the garbage trucks, you have to have 10% by 30, and then 50% by 35. And all of this, and you just keep phasing them in. And that's the other problem, is that, you know, if you have just a term of 10 years, you're going to be forced to buy every one of those trucks at one time, which is a tremendous cost and a tremendous drain, as opposed to phasing them in over the years as they
Which keeps the rates flatter over a longer period of time. Councilwoman Pappen or Vice Mayor Pappen suggested that we do a letter for a different issue. We talked about it last time. The problem for organics having to leave San Mateo County because we don't have a facility. CCAG does the 5-year or the 15-year mandate disposal capacity. Could we ask the mayor, would you be willing to bring this to CCAG and really start pushing the county to find capacity, composting capacity in county? Long range, that will save us a lot of long hauls on that. But we talked about it the last time, we didn't do that. But if the mayor would be willing to do that at CCAG, it's going to take them a couple of years to get there. But we're an agricultural county. There is no reason we don't have composting in county on that. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. I mean, I do recognize the cost of running, you know, the recycling and the garbage business is just ever increasing because of the mandate that just keep, you know, coming from the state. It's not easy to keep California clean. And that's one of the main reasons why we still have 53 electoral votes in the state of California. So, you know, I do recognize the challenge in this business.
I would take it a step faster. There is nothing that an individual in California can do more for climate change than to participate in the organics program and the recycling program. It's really that simple. So what you pay in your garbage bill is an investment for all of our futures on that. And I would say also from my days of doing recycling market development, why I like our dual stream system, everyone, we have cleaner materials, which means they go to better product, they go to better markets. And we lost a little bit, but we got to bring domestic manufacturing back to US. So it's really tied into domestic jobs.
And we appreciate the concession that you made as part of this contract and continue to find ways to, you know, provide more services and convenience to our residents. All right. Any other comments? Take motions?
A motion to adopt a resolution approving an amendment to the franchise agreement with South San Francisco Scavenger Company for additional services and term.
Thank you. Go ahead and do it.
Pappen second, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Sandrini, for being here. Questions?
Yep. Thank you for the comment and the public as well. Okay. No further comments? Okay. City Clerk, would you please?
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Riley.
Aye.
Councilmember Snyder.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pappen.
Yes.
Mayor Fung.
Aye.
Existing business number 11 passed by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you, South City Scavenger and Mr. Button, and also public comment. Okay. Council comments. Who would like to go first? Councilwoman Ann Schneider.
As I stated, I went on the tour that follows our water system, takes you to see UV disinfectant. I really do encourage staff to go on the one next spring. They do it in the spring and the fall, so now I got to see the system during the downtime when the lake is lower on that. And lots of new information that I will get to you, including that map of water districts and things like that. Thursday is bike pedestrian meeting, and I'm bringing this up more for the vice mayor and the mayor. There's apparently a 101 corridor connection program. So Caltrans, under a Caltrans Sustainable Management Grant, the SMCTA has been working on identifying ways to get people over 101. They have broken it down. They looked at everybody's active transportation plans. They brought it down to 25 plans in the north, central, and south. I have no idea if Millbrae is in there on that. They've identified, again, these 75 projects to look at trying to get people safely over 101. And I hope that we are there with Millbrae Avenue. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman. Vice Mayor.
Thank you very much. Very busy time here. Let's see, the Peninsula Congestion Management Relief, actually we haven't met there yet. Economic Vitality had a very good meeting. There was a presentation on Millbrae's proposal for Community Benefit District. So a lot of education going on that front, and many good questions were asked about that. Hopefully we'll have an additional presentation along those lines. Metropolitan Transportation Commission meets tomorrow, but they've been meeting regularly these days on a potential funding for transportation agencies. There are 4 specific out of the 27 different operators that are heading for a financial cliff. MTC is proposing something that myself and our other representative are not in agreement with, which is a tax on San Mateo County. Majority would be funding BART and the Muni. So we're still in discussions here. We are a part of a 3-county agreement regarding Caltrain, and they have some issues coming up. So the agreement needs to stand, that all 3 counties have agreed to a percentage share of the burden and costs here. So we are still in negotiations. MTC is trying to get some sort of message sent to Sacramento. We do not have an agreement at this point in time. Also, we are looking at a potential bridge toll increase because there are less cars crossing the bridge, and the mandate for maintaining the bridges and preserving the bridges is extremely high. And there's a lot of costs that go into that besides painting them because they're up against the elements. But maintaining the bridges is done daily, inspecting them done so frequently all the time so that they are maintained, that they are safe for riders. But we are probably looking at an additional bridge toll increase just to cover the costs of doing that. And they are looking very closely at the impacts on the communities, especially people that have to commute in and out of our region and also have to cover multiple bridges. So that is likely going to happen. We are also trying to get some information for cities like ours on the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority. This city has talked about, and hopefully we will do before some of us leave, increasing our affordable number from 15 to 20%. Not getting, I think I lost the city manager on that one. Hopefully that will be happening sometime soon. Congestion management and environmental quality had a meeting. We were studying 2 safe routes to schools. Millbrae has some grant money for that, and we thank you, Sam, and city staff for really, we're seeing a lot of these temporary speed bumps. I don't know that's not the proper terminology, but trying to slow down traffic and hopefully a little more enforcement since some lady ran a red light or stop sign today and almost hit me. So pay attention, drivers. We don't want any accidents there. There was a meeting too of the CCAG Resource Management and Climate Protection Committee where we discussed Proposition 4, which is expected to provide certain funding allocations for climate programs. So please read carefully on that. It has to do with water and different climate programs. It's on your ballot. There was also a presentation on EV Pro electric vehicle services for cities, commercial fleets, and it is where the cities can lease EV vehicles. I did get an education from one of our staff members who's very well informed and read frequently. I guess we don't get the credit unless we buy the EV vehicles. But just in case we need to lease any extras, there's a group called EV Pro out there, which you may want to take a look at. And also a presentation, a very sad presentation from the California PUC on how long it takes PG&E to respond. And the numbers are horrific. 45 days, 100 and some days here. So I know our staff does this, but anybody looking for a permit, the moment you get it, go to PG&E and get in line to get whatever you need. And however our staff can help people who are trying to do whatever they're trying to do in their homes. A 45-day waiting period is just not acceptable, and I know it's longer than that, but the San Francisco PUC is tracking all this. The sad part was they seem to think that's normal. The mayor of Burlingame, who chairs this committee, as the rest of us, are very disturbed that anybody should have to wait 45 days for PG&E to get out there and do what they're supposed to be doing. So on that last note, we have a commissioning committee years of service recognition luncheon coming up. So thank you to people who are serving on the committees very much. They will be recognized at this luncheon on the 6th, which is part of the duty of the vice mayor to hand out the pins. So we look forward to doing that. Oh, and also, sorry, we had a Park and Rec Committee meeting. There's a new chair. Mr. Henderson will be the new chair. The vice chair is Commissioner Douglas. And we talked about, they got a whole new education on Brown Act and a whole bunch of other things. We did talk about providing or getting a corporate sponsor, somehow shading the dugouts at our fields. Because Burlingame does it. Sorry, yeah, I'm very competitive. The heat we're getting these days, if there is a way you have the chain link on top of some of them and you just put some wood slats in there. I'm sure we could get corporate sponsors somehow along those lines, but it would be very helpful to make sure our little athletes, male and female, are not getting too much sun out there. Marina Vista Park will be done in November, I understand. So that's what was reported. There's a nod from the audience. Yes, I'm not misinforming. So thank you for that. Greatly appreciate all that from staff. And hopefully we did a great job last year on Central Park holiday lighting. Compliments to staff. We kind of had a adopt a reindeer program, so I'm pushing for that one moving forward here too. The more we can do there to liven up our Central Park every year, it's a great thing. So lots to report on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you so much, Vice Mayor. It's been a busy 2 weeks. All right, anyone else? Okay, all right, so I'll try. Attended the Volunteers of the Year, which celebrated former Mayor Wayne Lee and also Planning Commission Vice Chair Maureen Davis and also Student Volunteer of the Year David Huang. You know, I just want to personally thank former Mayor Lee and also Maureen Davis for many, many years of service to the city. The great dedicated public servant that we have, and we're a better community because of your dedication. We're very thankful for that. And also seeing year after year, we have newer youth stepping up to be the volunteer, with David. I'm just very, very excited and thankful to see our youth getting involved. Just as tonight, we have 4 youth who obviously understand the need of public service and what it means to serve your community. So for that, I think the better days for our city is way ahead. Congratulations to South City Vice Mayor Eddie Flores on being the president of the Peninsula Division of the Cal City. Attended the Long Beach meeting and on Cal Cities, and outlined a number of initiatives that we look forward to working with them certainly. And I would also encourage our newer council members to join Cal Cities and various different committees, so we can start meeting our regional elected and expanding the reach of Millbrae, so which is part of the work that is important. Council of Cities coming up this Friday. I'd like to welcome all the elected and all the city staff from the entire San Mateo County to join us for an evening, just to see what Millbrae has to offer. We'd love to host everybody here. City Manager, if you can just kind of give us a little update on the locations and timelines and sort of the program for the evening.
Sure, Mayor. The event will start at 5 p.m. That'll be gathering, and it will be held at the Station 16 Apartments on the east side of the BART station.
Okay.
And it will include initially the tour of the new biotech campus. Alexandria was kind enough that we will have actually hard hats and vests to go up to the top floor.
Yep.
Amazing what's happening over there in the views. We'll walk over there and then walk back, have dinner, a presentation of several of our local companies, Alexandria, Longfellow, and just have an enjoyable evening. Yeah. Yep. And Lucid is on the agenda as well.
Okay, perfect. And we have excellent food.
Excellent food from, I'm going to turn to our city clerk who's helped coordinate that, because
all the excellent work that you have done, and and I heard the type of dessert that you have ordered is the kind that the more you eat, the slimmer you get.
The more you eat, the more you want to eat, actually. So.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, all right, so you're going to keep it a little secret, and then
well, those are the Portuguese egg tarts from
There you go.
So
That's
a little
it.
plug for everybody that's out there. If you haven't been
Oh
to
my
Suzanne's
God.
Bakery, if you haven't tried the Portuguese egg tarts, they are off the charts good.
But I can guarantee you this, all the food come from Millbrae.
All the food comes from Millbrae restaurants, correct?
And I think we will have a...
Yeah, no, our city clerk, Elaine Tran, can quickly run down the menu.
Yeah, here you
So we have a really good variety of entrees and also appetizers from various restaurants in the city. We do have the hand pulled noodle down on Broadway. We also have Asian Pearl. We have 16 Mile House. And we also have Nothing But Bun Cakes as well. So we do have a variety of different things. We also have a lot of goodies for everybody.
Let's make sure Daily Journal writes about that. Okay.
And local red and white wine from Bacchus.
Oh, perfect. Excellent. All right. So let me just kind of finish it out here. So met with our Sacramento lobbyist in Long Beach, city manager, and I had a breakfast with them, and then I invited them to join us at the Council of the City this Friday. They'll be joining us and just, having discussions with, also meeting the new council members as well. And, discuss how to continue to expand Millbrae's reach into the governor's office and on various different topics. And we'll also be working on setting the next year's legislative agenda moving forward here. So, plenty to go and plenty of work ahead of us here as we look forward to the end of the year and the new year coming up. So that's what I have for update for now. Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
And remind everybody, we have an election coming up.
That's right, November 5th. Make sure everybody come out and vote.
Yeah, and if you lost your ballot, or whatever, you can request a new one. You can show up. You can vote there. You can actually register that day. 2 measures for Millbrae are on the ballot. One is Measure J for the school district, and the other is Measure FF, is related to term limits.
Sign your ballot in the back.
Yeah, don't forget to sign it. You don't need postage, but sign it and date it before you can drop it off. There's still the ballot box.
Right out in front of City Hall.
Right out in front, and the weekend before, where's the polling place gonna be?
Charcuterie room.
That's correct. It'll be in David J's Jacuzzi Community.
in the Jacuzzi room. So please participate. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ann Schneider, you have any
I
final
would
comments?
only add, I go all the way to Yosemite, city manager, our staff. Last year I brought you the 100-year anniversary water bottle. This is the next one. I'm still hoping that we're going to get that display catalog for things because we are part of this 102-year-old water district now. And again, staff, go on the trip. My trip, it was almost all staff from various cities.
When you mention that, Mr. Eduardo Gonzalez is on that display case.
Oh, good. Here we go. Present.
All right. If there's nothing else, I adjourn the meeting tonight at 10:05 p.m.
Sam, this is the